You know what we've never done on the show, Fatty? We have never read mail from our listeners. Here's one. Hi, Hottie and Fatty. First, I'm loving the podcast. Thank you so much for putting this together with Michael, Jonathan, and Rebecca. It is my first Leadville, so I am obsessed with the details of this race, and this scratches my itch for information. If I can make a request, would it be possible to have a special edit of all the course segments together? Thanks, Etienne.
Etienne, that is a great idea. This bonus episode is for racers obsessed with the Leadville course, people like you, and us, and pretty much everyone else who listens to the show.
3, 2, 1.
Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race, the show that breaks down, builds up, gets you ready, and freaks you out for the highest and hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country.
Hottie, we get a lot of email about the race, and we love getting these emails and the questions from our listeners. The single most common request we've been getting is for this bonus episode, the one we're doing right now, a compilation of all our segments on the course. 12 segments at 10 to 15 minutes each, however, means this is a long bonus episode. But we figured that's okay, since a lot of our listeners are going to be getting this episode either while they're packing for Leadville or traveling to Leadville or have arrived in Leadville and are laying around with their feet up, getting acclimated to the altitude.
Yes, it is a course compilation. So if you've ever had time for a Leadville podcast episode with a runtime of about 3 hours, well, this is it. That said, to make it easy for you to navigate around this episode, we've put the start time for each segment in the show description. So check that out if you want to jump to a certain part of the course.
And we want to make sure to thank the presenting sponsor for this monster course extravaganza, the feed.
Fatty, in this episode, we're about to talk to folks about the course like we know every single inch of it. So here's a question. What is your predicted finish time for the Leadville 100 this year?
That's a great question, Hottie. And I am still puzzling that out. And to be honest, I have no honest idea. I have focused my training on volume as opposed to intensity this year. I'm about 7 pounds heavier than I was last year. And most importantly, I will be racing the Breck Epic this year. My wife Lisa and I are going to be racing for 6 days prior to the Leadville 100. So that's about 6 hours of hard riding per day for 6 days, with the Leadville 100 coming the day right after that. So what's my finish time going to be? I've been telling people who ask 9 hours, 30 minutes, but that's just me saying a number because I feel like I ought to. I just don't know.
Well, our friends at the feed have an idea. How about a contest to predict your finish time?
Yeah.
We're calling this contest, How Fast Will Fatty Finish? All you have to do to enter is predict Fatty's Leadville 100 finish time, and the feed will send the new Leadville box to the 5 people with the closest predictions.
That is a nice prize. It includes all my favorite new race nutrition from the feed, and I'm bringing it myself and using it at Breckenridge this year.
So, obviously, all our listeners are eligible. Can I get in on this action?
I'm afraid not. I think there is some legalese reason not. But what would your guess be if you could?
For your time. Well, I'm going with Lisa the Hammer's formula. She has a great one. Take your crusher and the tusher time and add 3 hours. So for you, that was 8:45, and you add 3 to that. It was 5:45 at crusher, and you add 3 to that. You come up with 8:45, and I think that's totally within reason because at the crusher, you didn't exactly crush it. I mean, it seemed like you were happy to be there, but it wasn't a focal point of your racing. So you came in at a comfortable 5:45. So I like 8:45 to 8:50 for you at Leadville.
Ooh, if I get an 8:50 at Leadville, I am going to be over the moon. I really am, as any sub 9 would just make me so happy. So, who knows? Maybe you're right. Maybe you're off by half an hour. Who can say? We'll find out in a couple of weeks. Anyway, to enter the contest, all you got to do is go to bit.ly.com/fattyfinish, enter your email to sign up for the feed newsletter, and you're going to like it, I guarantee, and enter your best guess for my finish time.
And our podcast listeners can get a great price on the Leadville box. Go to thefeed.com/Leadville and be sure to use the code Leadville15 for a 15% discount that is on the Leadville box.
Yeah, you can use that code anytime you're buying any amount of Morton, too. So even if you're not buying our Leadville box, you can still use that code when buying Morton, get a 15% discount.
Again, it's thefeed.com/Leadville and use the Leadville15 code at checkout. And be sure to enter that contest at bit.ly.com/fattyfinish.
All right, let's get to the course.
And now, Fatty, onto the course. A very important part of the Leadville Trail 100. There's actually a course out there. Each week, we're going to discuss a segment of the Leadville Out and Back format. We'll do this in order. If you are new to the race or if you've messed it up in the past, you'll find answers here in this segment. If you're an LT100 vet, you can blast our takes on our website, Leadville100podcast.com. Tweet with the hashtag Leadville100podcast, or text or leave us a voicemail. We have a phone number for this podcast.
Heck
it's
yeah.
719-453-1514. You went through great lengths, I think, Fatty, to get a phone line for us. That's perfect.
Oh, yeah, a Leadville phone number.
Yeah, that's a 719 area code, right? That you'll find that right at somewhere in downtown Leadville, that area code.
I spared no expense for this podcast. I think it cost me $4.
Well, this is episode 1. So, of course, Fatty, we begin the course with the start line.
That's right. This starting line is an amazing part of this race. And so while we, in this episode of the course, will not move a single inch, we're going to make a lot of progress on the race from the bed to the starting line. There's a lot to talk about here, so it's going to be a little bit of a lightning round, but here's what I want to start with. The night before, do you have a list that you have checked off everything so that you have everything ready to go? Hey, make yourself a list. Start it now. Stuff that you care about for your bike, stuff that you want to eat, all of the things that you care about. Get that done. Next, what time are you going to get up? You've done this race a half a dozen. Well, yeah, you've been there. You've started 5 times. What time do you get up, Hottie?
Earlier than you, actually, 3 or 3:30. I think when I paced a guy twice, and he liked to get to the start line really early. So I think our wake up call was like 3:15 or something like that.
That's very early in the morning, but that is the reality. Get up super early. Give yourself plenty of time for your first coffee and then your first breakfast, your first poop, because we're dropping all filters here, right? Mm-hmm. All the last minute bike stuff. Last year, if I would have given my bike a final last minute once over, who knows, I might have saved half an hour off of the mechanical that I found myself with 15 minutes into the race.
Was that the seat mechanical?
Yep,
that mechanical?
My saddle rail, it broke in the first, before I even hit dirt. Very good chance that it was broken when I started the race and just didn't feel it until I started hitting bumps. Should have done that one last minute check. So take care of all of that the night before or when you first get up. Have checklists that you get through. Give yourself plenty of time. This is not the day that you want to rush and find yourself first thing in the morning with a flat tire and no time to fix it, right? Next thing, and I think this is super important, what are you going to have for breakfast? And in my humble opinion, there is one correct answer, and that is whatever you've been having before your long rides the whole season. It's not time to experiment with something new because some know-it-all like me tells you that it works for him. My scrambled egg burrito won't necessarily work for you the way it works for me. And if you've been eating oatmeal the whole season and I never eat it, I think oatmeal, wow, all that fiber, crazy idea. But if it works for you, awesome. So
it does work. It does work for me.
Yeah.
That's why but like you, Fatty, preparing the night before, I make it the night before because I use steel cut oats.
Oh.
So I just make it the night before and then it's ready to go in the morning. I don't have to fuss over the stove or anything. Just heat it up, go.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of steel cutouts, and I have no diss for anything anyone uses. My sole point is it's what you've been using that you've gotten comfortable with, that your GI system is 100% okay with, because this is not, trust me, the day you want to have a gurgly stomach at the starting line, right? So what time do you get to the start line?
It has varied. I mean, as I've gotten more confident with what I'm doing there, I've pushed it to, and as my corral position's improved, and once I started doing corrals for that matter, I think I am more comfortable getting there at 5:45, maybe closer to 6, depending on the bathroom situation. My first time, there were no corrals, and, you just basically tried to get there as early as you could, 5:20 or so you could be up, hopefully, on the other side of Harrison Street there. But now they have corrals, and it's much easier. So I can push it to 6. I think I did 6:10 this past effort, and that was fine. I was, I was in good shape.
You are a bolder man than I am. I have been in the Silver Corral for a couple of times, and even so, I am, and that's a second corral back, and even so, I'm getting there around 5:45. I'm a very nervous person, and I know that I am going to need to use the bathroom at least once or twice more times, and it doesn't matter whether I get there, 20 minutes or half an hour before the race begins. I got to go again. So whatever you do, don't get there at 6:20. It is going to be so packed and so crazy, and the line goes, no lie, 2 blocks plus back. Get there in the 5s is what I would say. I target 5:30, right?
While you're on the restroom subject, this is something people really do need to think about too. I have found that the availability of restrooms has improved especially in recent years. Like they spread out the porta potties pretty good from front of the race all the way to the back. Is that what you found?
It's not too bad. I honestly have not checked a lot of times because for the last several years, I've always taken care to reserve the place where I'm going to be staying, which is within a block of the starting line, a year ahead. So I've been staying really close. I haven't been using those porta potties. The important thing I would say to someone who is new to the race is the day before the race, when you're doing packet pickup, find out where those porta potties are and maybe where some of the less obvious ones are, so that the line you're going to get in is a little bit shorter. Right? Not a bad idea. So a question that I think is worth considering is you're getting there, say 5:45, 6, whatever you decide is the right time to do. You are going to be standing in place for 45 minutes to a half hour. It's at 10,000 feet, 6 in the morning. It is cold, sometimes very cold. What are you going to be wearing while you are standing in line? Do you have a strategy on that? I certainly do.
Yep. Mine is layers. I have a pair of very thin, like sweat-type pants that go over my kit or my bike shorts. Then I have another shell type of, the zipper-type pants where you can zip the legs off. Those go over the sweatpants. On top, depending on how cold it is, I might have some type of thin fleece over my jersey and arm warmers, and then an outer jacket of some sort as well. So I wrap myself up, and as I feel like I'm getting warm or whatever, too warm, I can start peeling some of those layers off and handing them to whoever my feeder might be for the day.
That is a great idea. Layers always make sense. I mean, there's nothing wrong at all with doing layers through the whole race, right? You're going to be peeling stuff off as the day warms up. For myself, I am such a huge fan of thrift store sweats and coats. A couple of weeks before the race, go to a thrift store, get yourself some sweats with a zippered leg, or just go ahead and cut up the cuff a little bit, and a super cheap jacket. I have a big white fleecy thing that I got about 5 years ago. Every year I toss it off to the side, just expecting someone to throw it away. Somehow for the last 5 years, it has found its way back to me every single year. I think nobody wants it. is why. But yeah, have something, whatever way you're going to go, have something to keep you warm while you are standing in line, so that you're not spending the first half hour before the race shivering and wasting energy. So that makes a big difference. Next, Is your GPS set up for the day? Make sure that the thing is charged and works the night before, right? And that it is set up to work for you the way that you like it for a big long day on the bike. Let me suggest that you do not have your heart rate showing, even if you are using a heart rate monitor, because your heart rate is not your friend and will tell you lies during this race.
Mm-hmm. For GPS, I go with a very simple screen setup.
Me too.
I don't need mileage. I know how long the race is. I do like heart rate because I want to know how hard I'm working on a particular climb or in a particular section. I generally will put speed up so I can tell what my pacing is like. So heart rate and speed, that's about all I need. That way I get two big screens. I know how high I'm going to climb in the race. I know how far it is. All I want to know is how hard am I working, how fast am I going? That's all I really need to know.
I have neither of those things on. The two things that I care about are time and distance. And those are the only things that I care about. How long have I been going and how far have I gone? My heart rate, I do not want to know what it is because at 10,000 feet, it tells me different things than what it tells me at 5,000 feet where I live. We'll talk more about GPSs another time. That is, I can tell that is a topic that we might want to deep dive on at some point. But I think we do agree that you want to have very few items on there. You are going to be race stupid during this thing. And a lot of numbers on your screen are just going to look like Greek numbers that don't matter, don't help you. And plus, of course, you're rattling around the whole day. So final thing that I want to say before we move on to a different topic is, what are you going to do while you wait in line? First of all, find a buddy, make a friend, because that person can hold your bike while you go use the bathroom one last time. And then you can, of course, do the same thing for that person. Work together, make a friend. You guys have somehow wound up in the same place at the same time after training the whole summer. Get to know each other a little bit. And then the last thing, and I think this is the most important, eat something. I think you and I both love the salted caramel bonk breaker bars. That's 200 something calories before you start riding your bike. You're not going to, it's so tight and so packed for the first half hour while you're riding, you're not going to be able to eat. Start fueling before the race even begins.
And now onto the course, the Leadville course. Each week, we will discuss a segment of the Leadville Out and Back format. We'll do this in order. So as you're listening to episodes, you're going to get the Leadville course broken down in order, including the return to town. We're going to tackle those segments as well, I should say. Whether you're new to the race or you've messed it up in the past, you're going to find answers here. If you have questions about the course or criticisms of our takes, I imagine you do, leave them on our website, Leadville100podcast.com. You can tweet them with the hashtag Leadville100podcast, or text or leave us a voicemail at 719, that is the Leadville area code, 453-1514. In show number 1, we detailed the start line scene. Now the anthem has been performed, and it's time for the countdown, the shotgun blast, and the roll out of town. And Fatty, this is no neutral start. I always tell first-timers to be ready for what is essentially a criterium on nobbies.
Yeah, it is theoretically supposed to be a neutral start, but in all the years I've done this race, with all the thousands of racers all around me, I have crashed a total of 4 times, and one of those times was 10 seconds into this race right at the beginning. Some guy wearing headphones at the beginning, listening to music, if you can believe it, surged from behind, hit my handlebars from behind, sent me down onto the pavement. I picked myself up, adrenaline everywhere, saw both my water bottles rolling down the hill away from me, and I'm chasing those. It was like trying to catch a couple of cats during a running of the bulls. And then in the middle of all this mess, I had to remount my bike while people are riding around me. Luckily, the bike was not damaged, and I wasn't too badly hurt, just really freaked out, and I rejoined the race. Now, without question, there are 3 parts of this race that scare me. And the first 6.1 miles from the starting line to the base of the St. Kevens climb, which is the section we're going to talk about in this episode of the course, is right there at the top. Everyone's together. Everyone is loaded with adrenaline. There's a lot of jockeying for position from the people who are starting at the back but feel like they belong in the front. And there are some legitimate reasons for some people to want to move forward, because the next section is a big uphill funnel. In other words, this is a strategically important first 6-mile segment, and it is a crowded madhouse. I feel like I'm making this out to be scarier and worse than it is, but it is something that you really do have to pay attention. You have to really be focused for this part of the race.
Mm-hmm. In 2014, there was a tree laying down on 6th Street, covering about half the road, and they just didn't have that. Remember, they didn't have time to pick that up. The riders simply had to swerve around that thing. The other thing is people are cold, so they're shivering. Mm-hmm. So in addition to being nervous, they're shivering because they're trying to go with as least amount of clothing as possible. And we're talking about a descent start, so it's maybe 38 or 40 at the start line, and you start going 35 miles an hour, and suddenly with the windshield, everybody's shivering, their elbows are out, so it's kind of a crazy little scene. What we want to do is let's break down this part of the course into the 7 top things you should know between the starting line and the first climb, St. Kevens. Now, number 1, in my book, when the gun goes off, the first thing that happens is nothing. Well, nothing if you are in corrals, I would say behind red. So it goes gold, silver, red, and then I guess they have green this year, purple, and so on and so forth. If you're behind red and you hear whoever fires the shotgun now, it's not Ken anymore, go off, you'll have your one foot clicked in and the other foot on the ground, and you will probably sit there and wait for the mass in front of you to clear out under the start-finish banner.
You will.
Eventually you will start moving. Slowly, but you'll start moving.
Yeah, and I use that countdown actually as my signal to hit the start button on my GPS. Depending on how far back you are, you could be waiting for 5 seconds to well more than a minute, for a couple of minutes. Now, I last year finished with an 8 hours and 31 minute finish time, which is, for most people, really good. You know, that would be the race of a lifetime for many people. That puts me in the green corral, which is 4 corrals back, and very likely I'm picturing that I will be on the opposite side, on the far side, down Harrison, which means that it's going to, even with a pretty fast finish time, I will be waiting at least a minute. People who have never done the race before, you should be expecting a couple of minutes before you really clip in and get going. Mm-hmm.
But don't worry, I mean, your time is based on your chip time, and your time will not start until you cross under the start-finish banner. So even though you're nervous, you're like, come on, I want to go, don't worry. The clock doesn't start until there is a shotgun time, and that's the timer everyone sees up at the start-finish line, but your time doesn't start until you cross under that start-finish banner. So here's number 2. Be confident or get on the wheel of someone who is or looks like they're confident. This comes down to, for me, experience. I mean, for the folks who have not been at a criterium on the road, I've actually advised people to jump in group rides, even on their mountain bike at times, to try and get a feel for what this is about. Because as you roll out of town, you are kind of wheel to wheel, elbow to elbow. And so it's good to find either someone who, find a confident wheel, or find somebody who looks like they know what they're doing, or have a buddy up with somebody. So if you have a partner and they're predictable and you know what they're going to do in a pack, that's great. I like to find a soft spot as I roll out of town. In other words, I like to move into an area where I feel like maybe there's a little more space, like where the riders have not decided to clog up as much. You'll find those little soft spots as you start to roll out of town, and it'll give you a little more space to react if something does happen, if that water bottle does fall on the ground. Again, like we talked about, it's cold. People are going to be shivering. People are going to be really nervous.
Yep. And people are also going to be aggressive in this first part of the course. There's no changing that. There are going to be people who are going to be trying to get around you. Maybe there are people who are moving side to side, looking for a great line. So don't be part of the problem, be part of the solution. Hold your line, read the crowd, don't be skittish or erratic yourself. And if you're not a strong, big, assertive rider, just tuck in behind someone who is. In my neck of the woods, we call those riders are meat plows. If you can get on the wheel of someone like that, someone who is big and strong and confident looking in a big downhill, as that person goes by you, tuck in. They can make your first 6 miles much faster and safer.
Number 3 now. Watch out for the accordion effect. This goes back to the road racing element we're talking about. And Leadville starts off like kind of a manic road race. Everyone wants to charge out of the gate. And you start downhill on pavement for at least a few hundred feet, picking up steam as you go along. But then the road turns a little uphill. In fact, pretty good little push uphill where you get those first deep breaths.
Yep, it's a good kicker.
As you go uphill, everyone ahead of you slows down. If you're more than 200 or 300 people back, this means you're going to see and hear braking well before you get to that little uphill kicker. So be ready for that.
That's right. I've seen people lock up and very narrowly avoid going down in this section. And it's sad because it's totally unnecessary. It's easy to fixate on the wheel, the one wheel a foot and a half ahead of you, instead of keeping your eyes open for the bunching up that is happening 10, 20, 30 bikes ahead of you. So watch what's ahead. Know that there will be a slowing as soon as the race begins, and call it out as you brake, so you don't wind up having the person behind you get surprised and rear-ending you.
All right, tip number 4 of 7. You've got two right turns in the first 2 miles of this race. 2/3 of a mile into the ride, right after you pass the high school, there's a hard, fast right-hander with gravel invariably on the inside of that turn. People are going to want to dive right, trimming that corner. If you are on the far right side of the crowd, you can easily get pinched.
You can. Yep. And then 1.7 miles into the ride, by which time you've built up a real head of steam, right? Because you've been going downhill for a bit. There's another right turn. For both of these, the rules are the same. Yell it out, slowing, right turn. Don't be so close on the inside of that turn that you have nowhere to go. If someone on your left dives a little too far right, give yourself an exit path. Keep your speed the same as the crowd around you. Don't lock it up. Just, hold your line and hope that everyone else does as well. But give yourself a plan B at all times.
Yeah, let's reiterate that. Don't lock up your brakes no matter what. I mean, braking is fine. You're going to have to brake, but just modulate. Just a little scrubbing of speed will be all you need to do. You'll be riding on sandy soil all day, but this sand on the pavement is slick and it's easy to slide out.
It is. I've seen it happen way too many times early in the race. People get a road rash that they have to spend the rest of the day with. And the sound of locked brakes makes other people panic brake. And then you've got a cascading mess on your hands.
Move up. This is tip number 5. Move up when you can. Move around or away from sketchy riders and communicate your moves as you are moving through the pack.
Yeah, the only thing I have to say on this are the corollaries. Don't move up when you can't. This is not a good place to take a gamble, which is a polite way of saying don't be one of those sketchy riders. And communicating your moves makes all the difference in the world. If you need to move in, point. If you see the trouble up ahead, call it out. Make sure everyone knows anything irregular that is going on around or in front or to the side of you.
I find that if I exude confidence as I'm doing this, and I've done this before, I've moved up. My first yard started at the back. I moved up easily 300 places just in these first few miles. If you know what you're doing, if you've raced some criteriums, if you exude some confidence, if you look like a solid bike handler, people are going to yield. They're going to let you in. That's what I've noticed the many years I've done it, is people will give you some space if you look like you know what you're doing. If you're being a fool, they're not. They're going to say, get out of here, get out of my way. Here's number 6. 3 miles in, the road levels off, and then you've got 3 turns and a railroad crossing. That sounds like an awful lot that's happening all at once. But even 3 miles, there's a lot more space around you than there was moments ago, back up on 6th Street, and certainly after that first right turn. That first right-hander is gentle, and you'll hardly even notice it.
Yep. And then a quick left takes you across the railroad tracks, and then seconds later, literally seconds later, a right turn onto the Jeep road, and that's when you can take a big, deep breath because you have made it down the dreaded, well, not so dreaded, but it's certainly a little bit nerve-wracking Leadville 100 downhill pavement. And you're going to be grateful for this flat once you get to it. It's for the first time in minutes, you are not flying downhill in this, in the 10,000 foot morning air, freezing your butt off. Assuming it's not raining and there's not a wet fog, both of which I've experienced at the beginning of this race, this Jeep road is going to get you warmed up, and in a few minutes, you are not going to be shivering, and you probably won't be for the whole rest of the day.
Now, that gets us to tip number 7. You're finally on dirt, the Jeep road. It's narrower and slower than you might think. It's a little, as I recall, it's a little sandy. Right? In fact, when you first turn onto it, you and everyone else in the race have been funneled into a flat, narrow Jeep road here. There are a lot of places where puddles collect. If it's been raining that week, even if it's not, there's usually puddling here, and people are still jockeying for a better place in the pack. Question is now a good time for you to burn some matches and move up on this Jeep road?
Yeah, it's not an idle question at all, Hottie. The further up the field you are, the less crowding you have to deal with while climbing St. Kevens, which is going to begin in just 2.5 miles from when you get onto dirt. If you are a very strong climber, and maybe you lost some places in the pavement descent because you're a smaller person and so just don't carry the momentum down the pavement the way some bigger riders might, it might be worth it for you to look for some openings now and jump from pack to pack. You can move up in this part of the race, but like anything in an all-day race, you have to decide whether it is worth the cost. There have been years when I've been on a single speed and so got moved pretty far back in the field by the time I hit the dirt. So it was worth it to go hard here on the flat so I could power up instead of walk up St. Kevens in my big single-speed gear. Other times, I've found it's better to hold a line, stay with a group, don't burn any matches, and plan just to kind of keep my place in line, saving those matches for later in the race when I really need them, and you will really need them.
Yeah, when I hit the Jeep road, I usually accept the position where I am. I go, okay, this is the spot. This is where I'm going to be, probably to the top of Kevens, unless, I see somebody really messing up and I can move around. But on a geared bike, at this point, I'm trying to just settle in. Okay, here are my peeps. We're going to go over Kevens with these people. So that takes us to about 6 miles into this 103.5 mile race and the beginning of the first climb, which is what we'll talk about next time on the course here on the Leadville Podcast. And now on to the course. Each show, we are discussing a segment of the Leadville Out and Back. We're doing this in order. So all you have to do is listen to the shows. You follow along. You're going to get a point-by-point, mile-by-mile breakdown of the Leadville 100 course. In show 2, we took you out of downtown Leadville and onto the first section of dirt. That criterium on knobbies, as we called it, is done. And the first climb of the day, St. Kevens, is now before us.
Yeah, it's spelled Kevens, pronounced Kevens. We are not making a mistake here. Yep, you are 6 miles into the race, right? And on its own, if you were just riding it a week before the race, you would think St. Kevens is no big deal. It's about 2.5 miles and 1,150 feet of climbing. That is not too much.
And this is one of those little sections you'll probably go out and do if you show up to Leadville early and ride it once or twice. It's not a bad idea because it's one of the first segments you're going to see. My strategy on Kevens, St. Kevens, has been to sit in. How do you ride it?
Well, it really is an it depends kind of answer. When I've been single speeding it, I got to be out in front because you either walk it on a single speed or you fly it. Other times, your time goal really affects how you're going to race St. Kevens. If you're going for sub 9 hours, then getting up front is very important. There are a lot of people close to each other, even still into 6 or so miles into this race. And toward the middle or back of the group, you are moving slower than the pace you need to be if you want to get that big 9-hour belt buckle. Once you're there, however, there is just not much you can do about it. Once you're going up St. Kevens, jockeying around, moving forward is just not worth the amount that you gain. So if you are planning for a fast time at Leadville, meaning a sub-9 time, you need to have moved forward the amount necessary on the pavement and on that flat dirt road section we talked about in the last episode. You are more or less stuck in the position that you have entered St. Kevens once you begin that steep uphill.
Mm-hmm. And if you are going for a placing or a low 8-hour time, does your strategy change at all?
Well, hopefully, if you were going for something really fast up on a podium, you are already far enough forward. The times that I've started in the Silver Corral, which is very, very close to the front of the race, St. Kevens is no longer a crowded problem. You just really sort of fly up it.
Mm-hmm. So that's the strategy. Let's get to the specifics now of this portion of the Leadville Trail 100. You can tell the climb is going to begin by mileage. You're 6.1 miles into the race, or you can look for the false flat Jeep road, a couple of cattle guards, a subtle left. Suddenly there'll be more trees around you, then Kevens pitches upwards.
Yes, it does.
There used to be a loose spot. In fact, this whole section here, the steep part, used to be pretty loose. The first year I did it, I was slipping and sliding quite a bit. And rutted. But recently they graded it, and if it has rained, then it's both smooth and grippy going up Kevens. So I have found in the last couple of times I've gone up Kevens, especially last summer, the ride and the climb itself, pretty good. It was pretty easy to get up. Could be crowded, though, on this climb, as Fatty said, with very little opportunity for passing people.
Yeah, and it really just isn't worth the spend. Be where you want to be by the time you begin that, by the time you get to 6 miles in the race. So let's break down a few of the numbers here. For this climb, the first mile is killer. So basically mile 6 to 7.1, you are averaging 9% grade. That is steep. Then you hit that hairpin. There's a hairpin, a hard left, you could say. And that is your signal that you are going to be at the end of the steep stuff in just another few hundred feet. You're still going to be climbing for about 1.3 more miles, but it is nowhere near as bad. And that hairpin should set off a little alarm bell, because this is a great time to eat for the first time since you crossed that starting line, because magically everything sort of thins out here. There aren't riders bumper to bumper, handlebar to handlebar. You're not going to be in the same crowded situation that you were even 1 minute ago.
Yeah, it's going to roll a bit from this point forward. After that hard hairpin we just talked about, on forward for those next 1.3 miles. But my overall memory is the sense of the burning in my legs fading a bit here. So you feel yourself start to recover a little bit. And it's around this section that Mara Lee, one of the race founders and directors, can always be spotted yelling for everyone and ringing a cowbell.
Yeah. I have a personal tradition of yelling, "I love you, Mara Lee," as I go by. We all love Mara Lee. You can't help but love her. She's the one who, if you are lucky, is going to put the finisher's medal around your neck when you get to the finish line. So you want to give her a little love right now. That said, I don't know if she yells anything back, because the sound of blood in my ears is just way too loud.
And then the first tricky spot, an off-camber right-hand turn.
Oh, and it really is. Yeah, I hit that with some heat in 2014 and went down fast and hard on my left side. It's sort of a decomposed granite, and so it just tore right through my shorts. It wasn't a serious injury, but, a little bit of a raspberry. And since I was wearing Rafa bibs, it was definitely expensive. So you cross another fire road. You go through a fire gate, which will be open on race day, but not before. So, you have to watch for that during any expeditions you go out to get to know the trail. And then you more or less descend a little bit of up and down to the Carter aid station. This is a neutral aid station. You can't have crew there. And that's all on double track.
Yeah, it's a nice double track. In fact, I like this section of the course.
It's fun,
pretty. There's lots of trees overhanging. Again, this is another spot you want to remember. Just log it in your memory bank real quick, because you're going to have to ride it coming back. A right turn brings you, after Carter Aid, brings you onto the turquoise pavement, the right around Turquoise Lake. So Turquoise Lake will be on your left, a big, wide, good tarmac road going straight downhill. And this spot, as you turn right off the dirt onto the pavement, in my mind, is a great spot to eat. In fact, this is usually where I take my first good gobble of food. Here we find more roadie style riding like we did coming out of downtown Leadville. Left at the bottom, though, you're gonna be screaming downhill. I mean, 30, 35. You'll be all topped out in your gears. You'll be in your highest gear. Gonna be pace lining, drafting, maybe taking turns with other riders. Then you're gonna bottom out on this pavement, on this ride around Turquoise Lake. There's a left at the bottom on pavement. Be careful here because it can be gritty around this corner, and you're going to be going fast. And there are potholes around the bend.
There are, and they're marked. They spray paint around the big holes, but it's a rural road, and it is not perfect pavement. And even though you're on a mountain bike, you don't want to be surprised by a big open hole in the road. So, in any case, remember that road section that you just flew down in a matter of seconds, because you're going to be riding it again in the other direction much later in the day when you are much more tired. So you've made that left, and now you've got a gentle mile of climbing ahead of you. If you didn't eat as you exited the Carter Summit Neutral Aid Station, be certain to do it now. You are not going to have as good or as easy of an opportunity for food again for quite a while, because you're going to be in a pace line, then technical climbing, then technical descending for the next little while. And we'll talk about that next time, but now is a good time to eat.
Yep. Get it down the throat when you can. And one last strategy tip. Do what you can to start forming a group here. Again, is it road? This is tarmac, and you start pitching up. Once you've hit that hard left and gotten through it safely, look for other people to get with.
Yep.
In just a few moments, you're going to be turning on to Hagerman's. And if you're already in a group here, you'll be able to shave some precious seconds and effort of your race by working in a pace line.
Yeah. Not a lot of people think to have a group already formed when they get onto Hagerman's. You're saying Hagerman's. I say Hagerman's. We'll find out which one of us is right. It probably doesn't matter. We know for sure it's Kevens, not Kevens. So I don't know. Who cares? But my point, and I do have one, is if you have a group put together, by the time you make that sharp right turn onto Hagerman's, you are going to have a much better time, because it is a gentle uphill, and a pace line can make a massive difference over the next couple of miles.
By the way, when you reach, you'll know that Hagerman's is close when you hear a lot of people cheering, because people stand there, they park their cars, they drive down to that point, park, and cheer you as you make the right onto the dirt.
Yep.
Hagerman's, whatever you want to call it. We're going to pick up from there in our next show.
That's
we'll
right.
take you up Hagerman's and then up Sugarloaf.
Yeah.
If you have questions, though, about the course, criticism of our takes, leave your inquiries and comments on our website, Leadville100podcast.com. You can tweet them as well with the hashtag Leadville100podcast, or give us a text, leave us a voicemail at 719-453-1514.
Can you believe that we are at the end of our third course segment and only 14 miles into the race? We are going to have to pick it up.
And now onto the course. Each show we are discussing a segment of the Leadville Out and Back. We're doing the course in order, so all you have to do is listen to each show and you'll be able to get a breakdown of the course as it happens, as you ride it. In show number 3, we went over the first climb of the day, St. Kevens, then back onto the pavement and around Turquoise Lake. We're 14 miles in, and now a right-hander onto Hagerman Pass Road.
Yeah, I am almost unwilling to say this, Hottie, because I don't want to jinx our listeners, but watch out for this hairpin right turn off the pavement and onto the dirt. It is a tight uphill right-hander. There's a lot of people around you. You're going onto dirt, and I have seen a ridiculous number of people wash out and go down right there. I've also seen a guy take a high-speed, high side on the way back, ending his day. But that's a topic for another episode, about 60 miles later episode.
Mm-hmm. There'll be a lot of folks there standing at the Hagerman Pass Road entrance cheering you on. That's great. Hagerman looks easy on paper, but there are some things to know about this road, some things to do and to look out for. Let's start with the to-know items.
Right. So the mileage is part of the to-know part of this course. You've got between 2.5 miles of washboarded, wide dirt road at a very mild climbing grade. That's Hagerman. Then a sharp hairpin left at mile 17 changes everything all at once. You go from wide, easy, mild, washboardy for sure, dirt road, to having a steep, rocky, semi-technical climbing jeep road and double track for about 2 miles, which will bring you to mile 19. And of course, while these numbers are helpful, the what to do and what to look out for are what really matter.
Let's go back to that 3-mile washboard Hagerman Road. It's kind of like this. Here I am on Hagerman Road, riding on Hagerman Road. Now, even though it's bumpy like that, this is a terrific opportunity to eat. Yeah, you'll be jostling around a little bit, but grab a gel, something, and swallow it down because the grade's not too bad. It's also a place you can go to the bathroom, take a pee. And you'll see a lot of people doing this, pulling over to the side of Hagerman and relieving themselves. Above all else here, you want to get a group to work with. Mm-hmm. There are going to be people like 20, 30, 40 feet in front and behind you. Make the slight effort to join a group if there is one, or bring 2 or 3 of you together if there is no group. Like, talk to each other. Hey, let's get together, guys. Work together. 3 miles is long enough that a pace line does help here.
Yeah, it truly does. And the flip side of that coin is that every year I've raced the Leadville 100, I found some big, strong guy who seems perfectly content to pull a train all by himself. And here is some great advice for free. Don't be that guy. Take your pole, be part of the group, but help yourself and everyone around you by showing folks that if you take a very short pole, 3 to 5 seconds, and you've got a good-sized group, 10 to 15 seconds if there's just a couple of you, and then let the next person go by, you are going to be a faster group. Don't sacrifice yourself. Don't make a hero pole. There's no reason to be a hero. There's plenty of you. Work together. In any, and this is true not just on Hagerman, but on any pace line during this race. So going back to the eating thing, I know I keep emphasizing this, but it truly is critical. As you get close to mile 17, where you're going to make that sharp left turn onto Sugarloaf, where things suddenly get technical and rocky, eat something, because you are at the last moment that you're going to be able to eat for a few miles. And not just a few miles, but for a considerable amount of time, which is even more important.
So you make that sharp left onto Sugarloaf. It'll be obvious on race day. But if you go out and ride the Hagerman and Sugarloaf before, and you probably should if you have time, you could miss this left. In fact, I know somebody who has missed the left turn onto Sugarloaf. A good buddy of mine who's stronger than me, got out ahead of me, had not been to Leadville before. We were out reconning this section of the course, and he takes off on Hagerman and gaps me and gets me out of sight and misses the left to Sugarloaf. And it's a tight, almost 180 turn. He missed a left, kept going straight. I don't know where he ended, but got pretty close to. I think he got out to the Colorado Trail, which is out there quite a ways. We ended up going up and over Sugarloaf and down the Powerline and down to the pavement. Of course, we're trying to text him, phone him. There's no service back there. So if you do Sugarloaf in training, it's a hard left. And what did we say, Fatty? About 3 miles up? About 3 miles. So just watch your odometer. Make that hard left onto Sugarloaf.
Yep, steep, sharp, almost 180 degrees, like you say, turn, and it is going steeply up all of a sudden. And like you mentioned, on race day, that is not a concern you need to have. Not only is it marked, there will be a course marshal who is waving you over so that people funnel in and don't pinch each other off on that turn. So I don't know about you, but Sugarloaf is my favorite part of this entire race. The day is warming up. The sun is coming up. My legs still feel great. I feel friendly. The caffeine from the coffee is hit. And it feels a little bit more like mountain biking and a little bit less like a time trial.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, me too. I'm not a huge fan of Hagerman except for the views. I'm actually happy to get off it and make that left onto Sugarman because I really like it. It tightens up a little bit. There's more trees. And a lot of folks say the same thing. I understand Rebecca Rush says the same thing about Sugarloaf.
Yeah.
It's just a great spot.
Yeah, so does the Hammer. My wife, anyone who really takes a look and thinks about it, they're like, you know what? This is a spectacular day on a spectacular course. So take a moment and enjoy it. Pro race tip there. This is definitely unlike, though, any other climb in the race, right?
The character of Sugarloaf really doesn't match up with what the other things you're going to see.
No.
The line is narrower, and you have to make line choices as you go up. You're either going to be on the left side of this trail or the right side of this trail, and there's lots of rocks and even some branches sticking out on the trail that will require you to move your bike around a little bit more. In addition, you're still going to be running into traffic here.
Sure.
So, yeah, you can pass, but it is tricky. You got to be patient as you try and move up the field.
Yeah, don't burn matches if you don't need to, I think that is the touchstone phrase of the day. After you've gone for a little while, not for a terribly long in distance, and I'm thinking it feels like about a mile, but it may be even less. Distances feel longer when you are doing hard climbs. Sugarloaf is going to ease off, and it rolls on in double track and Jeep road for a bit. Almost always some puddles that you can either choose to go through. I would recommend against that because you don't need that gritty sand in your drivetrain for the next 80 miles of the day. And then at 19 miles, Sugarloaf is going to turn down precipitously, which means that you are no longer on Sugarloaf, but you are on the Powerline.
And the Powerline descent will be the topic of our next installment of the course. And now on to the course. Each show we are discussing a segment of the Leadville Out and Back. We are doing the course in order. So just go back to, if you haven't heard the course so far, go back to episode 1, start at the start line with Fatty and I, and we'll work you right through to our segment for today. You're now down from the starting line over St. Kevens, down the May Queen Road, and in show number 4, we blasted onto Hagerman, some people say Hagerman Pass Road, made the left onto the Sugarloaf climb, that's Fatty and I's favorite, and took it to where the massive electrical towers come into view.
Oh, yeah. And, that seems like a lot of racing. It seems like way more than just that 20% of a race that you have actually done. And those power lines are humming and can be a little bit of scary, especially if the weather is a little bit rainy. You hear them sizzle. But here we are, 19 miles in, and at one of the most loved/hated segments of the Leadville 100, the power line. But before we get into interpreting what is, in the end, just your first dirt downhill of the day, let's get into the facts of this part of the race.
Yeah, so you're at the second highest point of the race when you begin your descent down Powerline, right at about 11,000 feet. So you'll be feeling the altitude as those rollers start rolling downhill. The Powerline is not that long either. It's about a 4-mile drop, a total of 1,400 feet.
Yeah, it's not a huge descent. And the objective amount of time that you're spending isn't that huge either. I was curious, so I looked it up on Strava, and on race days, I take between 13 and 17 minutes to do this 4-mile segment. And I guarantee you that with the scores of people that pass me during the descent, a lot of people are doing it in much closer to 10 minutes. Just sort of as a interesting factoid, I see that the KOM for the Powerline descent is 7 minutes, Hottie. Do you know what your time is on that?
Powerline, no. I try not to obsess about descent speeds or times too much. Just let them happen.
That's wise. Yeah, let them happen. Don't rush, because you kind of want to keep the rubber side down, right?
Yeah. I like to break down Powerline into kind of 2 descents. The top is rocky. There are both loose and embedded rocks up there. Lots of sharp, rocky dips that might be dry or might have some water to slosh through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're in the trees a lot there. If it's a bright day, you'll be getting a lot of that stippling effect in your eyes as you go through those trees. And you had a tip with dealing with that, didn't you, Hottie?
Well, first of all, when you're on race day, not only expect a glare, because the sun will still be low out of the east, and you're kind of riding eastbound at this point. You'll have glare and you'll have dust. So it makes it really difficult to see. The sunlight in the top section will beam through the tree limbs and at times blind you as you come around a corner. So be ready for that. Here's my other little hottie tip. Definitely you want to go out and ride Powerline if you have a day to do it. But what I'd advise folks to do is get up early on that training day and ride it at the same time of day you think you'll be going down it on race day.
Oh, that is a great idea. I don't know if I have ever done that, but yeah, the light and the way it kind of flashes into your eyes as you're going through those evergreens, it definitely is distracting, especially if it is the first time you have done it. So as you're doing this on race day, this first little bit has sort of a resorting effect on the field, right? The good climbers have had a lot of chances to get out in front during the day. And now you've got a big descent where the great descenders are having their moment. And that's all good. Everyone's good at different things in this race. And very few of us are competing against anything besides a time objective. So in other words, if you're one of the fast descenders, show some kindness to people like me who are nervous in these kinds of descents. Call out your passes clearly and with the recognition that we are at altitude. Remember, we were at 11,000 feet seconds ago. And so we are not smart at the moment. Don't make a pass if you can't do it cleanly and safely for both you and for the person that you're passing.
And, of course, the flip side of this is true as well. Fatty, people who aren't comfortable going downhill need to be listening for folks coming from behind and help them out. Move to a side, holler out to that person behind you to come by. Because at its best, the Leadville 100 is a cooperative ride. Now, the second half of the descent is sketchy for different reasons. It's a loose soil you'll be riding on, generally well-packed, but with a little layer of sandy, kind of gravelly, decomposed granite on top. So keep your speed in check here because sliding out is a distinct possibility.
Yeah, it truly is. And that's just half of the high-speed puzzle of Powerline, right? There are numerous erosion ruts in this second part. And if you are not looking ahead and plotting out what you're going to be doing in the next 10 seconds, not just in the next 1 second, you can find yourself sort of squeezed into a bad line by a deep trench that practically forces you off the trail. And if that happens, you have to get off the bike. That's fine. Don't sweat it. It's happened to hundreds of people, including me. But you can avoid it by focusing forward instead of just 10 feet ahead of you. Look, 10 seconds ahead of you, and you're going to be a lot better off.
So we should probably talk here about the twin dangers of Powerline, crashing and flatting.
Yeah. The best advice I can give is don't do either.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Thanks, Fatty. Very helpful.
That's the objective of riding a bike. Don't crash, don't flat.
But you do see a lot of people on the side of the trail every year, and they're tending to a flat or tending to an injury. I've seen a guy actually endo right in front of me when passing beyond his ability, and I've seen well north of 100 people. I would guess 200 people in my 20 years of doing this with flats on this section of the race over the years. So there's a couple of things to avoid, help you avoid crashing and flatting here. Well, I'll go ahead and let you start with those, Hottie.
Well, let's first start with the crashing, which is probably the scariest part. There actually used to be a lot more of this at Leadville, but the course is so popular to pre-ride before the race now that on race day, the best and cleanest line is pretty obvious.
Yeah.
Ride within your ability, you'll be okay. Yeah. And adding to that, the descent down Powerline is a really good section of the course to have pre-ridden if you get a chance to come to Leadville in the weeks or days before the race. Ride it up to understand the climb, then ride down to get comfortable with that proper line, the good line of that descent.
Yeah, and it really will be obvious. You're not going to have to be picking the best line. You just go ahead and do the line that hundreds and thousands of people have done. Not hundreds of thousands, but thousands of people.
Wouldn't you say in general, stay out of the rut? As you get to that lower section, though, the upper section's rocky, and you're going to be picking a line like you would in a traditional single track section that you might ride at home. It's that lower section that it has, I think, a more obvious cue that we should be giving. That is, stay out of the ruts.
Yep, stay out of the ruts. And for me, little tip, don't spend a lot of time looking at that rut. I have a tendency to go to what I am looking at. So if I'm looking at something I want to avoid, there is sort of a gravity well effect, and I will find myself in it. So look at the line that you want to be in, and don't get obsessed with that rut, regardless of which direction it happens to be taking you to.
Yeah, and get comfortable with a little sliding. There's going to be a little
Sure.
sliding on Powerline, especially on that lower section. Now, Fatty, you've had things go wrong for you on the Powerline, no?
I have. I once endoed while coming down the Powerline. It was my second year of racing Leadville. I had unimaginably good luck, though. I stepped out and over my bars as I went over, somehow managed to unclip and landed on my feet. I don't think I could ever repeat that again in my life. I certainly am not going to try, but I had good luck that one time.
You're a genuine acrobat. That is incredible. And we're going to put you in the circus next. Now, pinch flatting is also a real concern on this course, on this particular part of the course.
Yeah.
With all the embedded rocks you're hitting at high speed. Again, those are mostly on the upper section of Powerline. Avoiding pinch flats really depends on two things: choosing your wheels, tires, and pressure carefully, and choosing your line.
Yeah. So I kind of want to do a weird transition here to the sponsor for a second, if that's all right with you, Hottie. I mean,
I'm fine with that. Yeah.
the fact is, Envy's, of course, one of our sponsors, and this is kind of their wheelhouse, as it were. Going to Envy, this is sponsored, but it's also true. I used to pinch flat all the time. I think most of us did back in the days of tubes, but I haven't pinch flatted in years. I seriously can't remember the last time I did. Part of that is tires. I use Specialized Fast Track Control for whatever that's worth. Part of that is the miracle world of tubeless tires that we all pinch flat much, much less often than we used to. But I think Envy is the biggest part of the whole equation, for me at least. Both the Hammer and I are riding Envy M525 wheels this year. They have these wide hookless bead rims that really do the trick here. Envy has this wide leading edge, and this big surface makes a nice forgiving platform. The tire can bottom out on the rim without cutting through it. And that's the whole point, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that M525 rim, that's something Envy has put even more. I mean, they've had hookless beads before, but the M525 takes it up a notch for them. That means that the risk of pinch flat has been even dropped down even more for any Envy rim. You can ride now with lower pressures because of that, which gives you a better traction and, of course, improved rolling resistance.
Which is nice on that sort of decomposed granite, the little slick sort of beads that you're riding on coming down the Powerline. Now, I weigh, I'm a little overweight still, 167 pounds. And I am still running with 19 pounds in front, 20 in the back. My wife, the Hammer, is running 18 in front, 19 in the back. We haven't, either of us, had a single pinch flat the entire year so far. And those are the pressures that I'm planning to ride at Leadville, including down the Powerline.
And I'm gathering you have not broken an Envy rim so far this year at any time, because they have that legendary build quality and strength. They build the wheels about an hour from where you live, Fatty, in Ogden, Utah.
Yep, I've visited the factory a couple of times. Very cool what they are doing there. And they're not cheap wheels, obviously, right? But which also means they are not cheap wheels in the bad way. I do remember a couple of years ago, Reba Rush and I were doing a clinic on Leadville and pre-riding the Powerline downhill, and she cracked a carbon rim while coming down the Powerline during that clinic. And I can just say that was before she had Envy as a wheel sponsor. And nowadays, she, like me, does not ride any wheels but Envy. Maybe a little lesson to learn there.
Learn more about the complete M-Series lineup at envy.com. That's ENVE.com. Fatty, let's get back to the last little bit of Powerline. Along with those ruts, the trail gets super steep for the final minute or so before you do a banked left-hander, blast down a straight fence line, and then You're at the famed creek crossing that you see in the Leadville movies.
Yeah, except it's gone now, which is, is it a shame or is it a good thing? I'm going to go with good thing. They put a pipe under the ground and now it's just a dirt road, which I'm going to say I'm happy for. Some changes are good. I just don't want a squeaky chain for the next 77 miles of this race. And that puts you on a quick uphill right-hand turn onto pavement. Lots of cheering folks there. And take a big deep breath because with any luck, you've just gotten down the power line unscathed. You're 23 miles into this race, just 80 more to go. And I did not make a mistake with my math. Remember, it's 103 miles.
Mm-hmm. And on the next installment of the course, you'll find out about the best opportunity you'll have in the entire race to go fast while working smart. And now on to the course. Each show, we are discussing a segment of the Leadville Out and Back. We're doing the course in order and are now past the Powerline, one of two technical descents in this race. Fatty, we're back on the pavement now.
Yeah, and you're just under 23 miles into the race when you hang that right onto County Road 5A. And here's something to put in your Don't Do It Like Fatty Did It file. It's a surprisingly steep little run up to that right turn with a lip onto the pavement. And I once started to turn before I hit that lip, stalled when I didn't have enough momentum to get my rear wheel over it, and I just keeled over. Oh. And there are about 1 million people on the turn on the way out. I'm not talking racers. I'm talking just people standing around watching and cheering.
So a little bust to the ego there, huh?
Yeah, definitely it hurt my pride. I also took note, though, that no one really did laugh at me or anything. There's kind of a running theme in this race that spectators and crew and other racers have a real respect / kindness for every racer out there. Yeah, this is a race with really good supportive vibes. It's not a sense of competition. It's everyone is out there to finish or to hit a time, and racers and supporters and spectators and crew members are as happy for you to do well as for their own loved one to do well.
Now, when you turn onto the pavement, County Road 5A, it's almost certainly been a bit since you've had something to eat or drink. Yep. You're really going down Powerline. You're probably not going to be eating or drinking. If you are, you're probably crashing. Most people are taking this moment now to grab a gel or otherwise heat, catch up on fluids, maybe have a peanut butter pickle honey sandwich.
That's right.
Look around for a group to work with. And that is important because you are going to be on pavement, on a straightaway, on more or less flat for a few miles here. There's one obvious place to work together during this race. This is it.
Yeah, it for sure is. Don't get too hung up on staying with a single group while you're doing this, though. It's not uncommon to join one pace line, find that it's too fast or too slow for you, and then bridge or fade to a different one. Work with a group, but only to the extent that it serves your interests. You don't want to be the person who pulls forever, or on the other, on the flip side of that coin, the person who doesn't ever take a pull. The best year I ever had in this race, I somehow stumbled into this miracle group of 4 or 5 of us where we all knew exactly what to do, how to work together. None of us spent more than 2 seconds in the wind in a given moment. We were this counterclockwise, rotating work of moving art, Hottie.
Yeah, and if you're lucky like me, one year I got behind or got in a group with a tandem, and the tandem roared down the pavement towards the pipeline feed. In a mile or so, you're going to go past the fish hatchery. Actually, I've been in the fish hatchery. It's a very cool spot if you want to do it. Oh, yeah, it's great to go in there. They have huge trout in there. In the early years, this was actually the first aid station, and then you bend left after the fish hatchery. You're going to bend to the left and continue for it's going to be around 6 miles of near flat road.
Yeah, and it's easy to average more than 20 miles an hour on this road. Much faster if you're with the right group. But watch yourself. This is not a place to burn a single match. If you somehow wind up in a pace line that has your heart hitting its limit, fade off the back because there's going to be another group shortly. Remember, there's 2,000 of us out on that road. There's going to be some people who are going the pace you want to go, and they're going to be coming up soon.
Yeah, there are plenty of places where you are going to have to give this race everything you've got. This rare stretch of flat pavement is definitely not one of them. There'll be a right turn onto more pavement, and then in a few minutes later, a course marshal on the road, you're on the pavement, will be waving you for a right turn off of the road and onto some double track.
Yep.
When you see this, prepare for it by moving just, ever so slightly to the left so you can dive right onto this flat double track for a half mile. You want your speed here going onto the double track.
Yep, you want to bring it because it is flat, it is fast, and you want to go ahead and carry all the speed you can. Save all your energy. Don't burn it into your brakes. When you come out of that, you're going to go under an arch, over a timing map, and you are at the Pipeline aid station, 20 miles into the race. And this is a good place to sort of assess how you're doing so far. Of course, it's way too early to say how your day's going to go. Some people burn bright and then fade out. Some people are big diesel engines that just get stronger as the day goes along. But here's some guidelines. If you do this, you go under that mat in about 2 hours, you're looking at a sub 9. Congratulations. If you do it in about 2:15, you are looking at approximately sub 10. Guidelines, right? 2:30, sub 11, and 2:55, sub 12. So, take a look at your computer, see how you're doing, see if you're on track, but don't go killing yourself if you're a little bit behind. Remember, you got to save those matches for later.
Yep, I've been over 2 hours going into Pipeline, and I managed to gold buckle, so it is possible.
Yes.
You can make up time, and this is not the race here, this first 2 hours. So now you're going to take stock and decide what you need here at the feed zone. And you're going to are you going to stock up, or do you even need to? You have 12 miles to get to Twin Lakes, and it's definitely, you could make that in one stretch. You could actually blow through Pipeline if you want to. It's definitely a decision you ought to have made before the race, though, because things can change as you're coming into this feed zone. What do you do at Pipeline? What do you do, Fatty, about when you're going outbound here?
Well, I have my crew skip this aid station altogether. I bring enough with me at the starting line to blow through without even slowing down. At the pace I go, I'm generally a sub 9-ish guy. It's less than an hour to Twin Lakes Dam from the Pipeline. However, I do encourage everyone at the aid station to cheer for me, and more or less people oblige. I love the energy of the crowd. How about you, Hottie? Do you stop there?
Now, I skipped my first year out because I just had one crew member, so I basically had no choice but to go right through the aid station. But the other times I have stopped, whether for a nature break, twice I was pacing someone and they needed refueling, so we did stop. Whether you stop or not, though, whatever group you were with before out there on the pavement, you will likely that group will likely have dissolved by the time you get through the other side of the Pipeline feed. So be on the lookout for other people to work with again. Not everyone. Now, everyone treats this 12-mile dirt road between Pipeline and Twin Lakes Dam as a quote-unquote flat section. But here's the rub. It's not flat. You're actually trending downhill from a high of about 9,700 feet at the Pipeline aid to the lowest point of the whole race out at Twin Lakes at 9,250.
Yeah. And you won't really feel like you're coasting downhill during this 12 miles because there are constantly steep little uphill grunts. I know I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but don't burn matches for these. You're going to need those matches when you are doing the Columbine later and, of course, the Powerline on your way back. Now, while most of this is dirt road, there is a short single-track section for a mile or so before you hit pavement very briefly, and then a wide dirt road back to pavement and a fast drop into Twin Lakes Dam, a.k.a. what I like to call Chaos Alley. I'm generally kind of a grouch about loud sounds, but I get so excited coming across the dam because there is this incredible crowd energy. I tell you, Hottie, it just catapults you forward. The shouting and clapping and the cowbells and the waving and everything. And, if you raise your hands and, cheer for them, they will send it back to you tenfold, I swear. I feel like I'm being shot out of a cannon when I leave, get across that dam and come out the other end of the aid station and onto the Columbine climb.
Yeah, I feed off that crowd too, but only once have I actually stopped on the dam. I use the Twin Lakes alternate feed zone at the foot of Columbine, and we're going to talk about the two different feed zones in a future episode on crewing. Either way, you will need some renewed energy because you're about to climb from the lowest point in the race, like we said, 9,250 feet, to its highest at 12,600 in one sustained push. That's the Columbine Mine climb. It's the turnaround point of this race, and that, along with the trip back down, is what we'll be talking about next episode in the course. And now onto the course. Each show, we are discussing a segment of the Leadville Out and Back. We're doing the course in order. We have reached now the chaos that is Twin Lakes.
Yeah, and the temptation right now is to deep dive into what happens here at this 40-mile aid station, because this is where people set up the crewing headquarters. But we're going to resist that temptation, at least for today, because crewing is too important a part of the Leadville experience to just shoehorn into this segment. We're going to have a complete feature in a future episode to talk about strategy and tactics for crewing. I promise you, whoever you have crewing, you're going to want to have them listen to all of that. I will say one thing in the meantime. I really recommend a Camelback for this part of the race, and I really recommend you put something in that Camelback, the Camelback bladder, that will get you your hydration and your calories. I'm for myself, I'm going to be using a liter of the Morton 320 drink mix. There's a reality to Leadville most people don't talk about because it isn't pretty. When you're racing to 9 to 12,000 feet, you breathe so fast. Chewing becomes a real problem. You have a hard time working up enough saliva to swallow dry food like waffles or sandwiches, and this is even more true during that climb up Columbine. For my first 15 years, I did not figure this out, and as a result, I didn't get enough down my throat, and I felt fine during the climb up Columbine. It didn't even occur to me that I was digging a pit for myself. As a result, this kind of thinking doesn't become apparent until you try to start putting some power to the pedals coming out of Twin Lakes Dam inbound at around mile 60 and find out that you got nothing in the tank. So for this segment, gels or Morton 320 or both, I'm personally going to have a liter of Morton 320. That's 640 calories in a Camelback Chase vest, and I'm going to be nursing that constantly. That's all the calories I will need to get back to Twin Lakes Dam, 22 miles, and what feels like several hours from now.
Yeah, ditto on that. I mean, at Twin Lakes, I would just empty my pockets of all the solid foods, put a fresh bottle on board, at least fresh, one big bottle and probably a small bottle in the cage. Mm-hmm. And then in my pockets, choose, blocks of some sort and some other gel or something else I could gulp down pretty easy so I could take that in while climbing, which can be difficult.
Oh, yeah.
And, of course, we're going to dig more into the crewing question at the Twin Lakes Dam, whether or not you want to use the alternate feed zone or the main dam. We'll get into all that. But for now, we're just going to roll on through and talk about a little climb called the Columbine. Fatty, I'm kind of stuck between not wanting to freak people out about this climb and really wanting to freak people out about this climb. I mean, I know that it isn't truly the hardest part of the day, but on the other hand, it sure can be. There's a little bit of a rolling of the dice with this climb if you're not already familiar with how you react to a big climb after you've got 40 miles of racing in your legs, or how you react to making a jump from 9,200 feet at the dam to 12,600 at the summit. You should know, however, that very few people come down from this mountain without more respect with it than when they started that climb. And with that ominous statement, look, this is a show that freaks you out about the Leadville 100.
And so why we're here.
Let's go into detail, Fatty, about the Columbine climb.
Okay, so we're going to start with an overview of what you're going to be doing here. From Twin Lakes Dam to Columbine Mine turnaround, you're riding just 10 miles. That's all we're talking about today, mile 41 to 51. Note that is the turnaround is at 51. You don't turn around at mile 50, so don't be looking for that on your computer. It's 51. And that's why, the race goes 103 miles. And you're climbing around 3,500 feet total. Depending on where you live, that may sound like a lot of climbing in 10 miles, or it may sound like a normal day. If you look at anyone's Strava around where I live, for example, there are very few weekday mountain bike rides that don't have this much climbing. But this is different, whether you do a lot of climbing or a little, because that 3,500 feet of climbing here in Leadville, where it's taking you, is crazy. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. I'm breaking this 10 miles into 3 mental segments whenever I do this part of the course. The first 2 miles and change has you rolling, not too hard. Then you've got 5 miles or so of wide dirt road grinding, just sort of breaking you out of tree line. Then 2 miles of hard climbing, meaning you're off your bike sometimes and doing a little bit of pushing. And that brings you to the mostly flat final half mile to the turnaround at that aforementioned 51 mile point. So just summing it up, roll 2.5, grind up 5, granny gear and push for 2, and a flat half to the turnaround. That's the overview, but it doesn't really even come close to telling the story. Let's sort of dig into the details of that climb, Hottie.
Yeah, let's do. In that first 2.5 miles of rolling, there are 2 or 3 short but steep grunts. Nothing particularly memorable here. Then, right around mile 43, you'll come to an alternate crewing spot, a mini chaos alley of sorts, which we'll talk about in our upcoming crew special. For now, just know that as you come out of this at the end, you'll see where our good friend of the pod, this pod, Dirty Kansas champ and alum and goo guy, Yuri Oswald, will have his goo sprinter van. So what you'll come out of the alternate feed zone, you'll make a right onto a wide gravel road, and as you start climbing towards the big hill, right at the top there, you're going to see Yuri Oswald, guarantee you. Give him a high five, he might give you a gel. I guarantee it'll be a goo.
Yep. And I always ask for a push, too, but he never gives me one. He has given me a bottle of Roctane once, though, which saved my bacon. I forgot to get a bottle coming from my own crew, and so I had something to drink on the way up the up the Columbine climb. That would have been a real problem otherwise.
Yep. Once you've said goodbye to Yuri, right around mile 43.5 into the race, you're saying hello to the Columbine mine climb. This is the main part of the climb. There's a bending left turn and sudden steepening of the road that lets you know, in no uncertain terms, the challenge is on. The first quarter mile will catch you off guard. It is hard. It's demoralizing.
Yeah, it is. I have a little tip on that. I've learned from doing this race and watching those around me so many times, Hottie. A lot of people get so beaten down by this tough climb, they settle into a super low gear and start riding in sort of a survival mode, as if the entirety of the Columbine mine climb is going to be steep like this first quarter mile. But it isn't. When the road goes by a little camping area, it's a sign to you. You are past the worst of it, at least for a little while. Assess where you are, how your legs are feeling, what you're capable of, and think about all those matches that you've been saving up, the matches we've been telling you not to burn. Now's the time when it's time, then it might be okay to start burning some of those matches because you were in one of the iconic places of this race. Clear up to mile 49, you're just going to be grinding uphill on dirt road. It's more or less a good place for you to sort of turn off your brain and ride with purpose for a while.
Hey, but keep your wits about you here, too. There are about 4 things you need to keep in mind as you churn up the mountain toward the Columbine mine turnaround. First, stay on the very far right side of this road. This is absolutely critical because before you know it, there are going to be racers coming down the other side of the road, and they'll be flying. I mean, we're talking about 30 to 40 miles an hour easy. So while there's a temptation to weave your way up this big, wide dirt road, maybe doing a paper boy, don't do that. Don't do it. Ride single file, except when you're passing, and keep those passes quick. I remember guys are becoming, and ladies are becoming flying down the hill here.
Oh, they are. And it's a real pleasure. It's one of the things I love about this race is you're doing this race, and you also have a really good front row seat of how the elite are doing in this race. So the second thing that kind of goes along with this, although it's not life and death like your point, Hottie, is a cultural thing with Leadville and a tradition I really like. cheer for some of those riders as they're going downhill. Obviously, you can't cheer for everyone because air is precious up there, and you kind of need to keep some of it for yourself. But every once in a while, yell some encouragement. That's sort of a Dave Wiens legacy. Through his entire reign on this mountain, as he was barreling down at, near speed of sound velocity, he would holler for riders who were coming up to the mine as he blasted down. It was really awesome and something that I think is a great thing to kind of keep going with.
Yeah, it's definitely a much-needed boost. You'll get a little pump from the guys who are in the lead because you'll hear them yelling at you, go guys, they will. They'll give you encouragement. It's kind of the understood rule there on the Columbine Mine climb.
Yeah.
The third thing to keep in mind, or in your head that is to eat. It is so hard as the air gets thinner and you're working harder to go slower than you've ever gone before. You just don't feel like eating at all. So do yourself a favor and commit to an eating schedule, like a gel every half hour, sips on an energy drink constantly. If you don't fuel here and now, you're going to pay the price later in the Leadville Trail 100.
Yeah, that is honestly the most important learning I figured out a few years ago after 15 years of bonking at around mile 60 because I just didn't eat during the Columbine climb. I'd get to the top of the Columbine and I wouldn't want to eat on the way down because it's tough to eat on the descent. And then after basically taking in no calories for more than 2 hours, I'd wonder why I bonked at mile 60 every year.
Yeah, you can't eat on that descent. So you've got to eat going up. Eat now or bonk later. It's just that simple.
Yeah.
And speaking of bonks, during this climb, you'll probably feel like you're bonking. Your legs will lose power. Your mind clouds up. You just won't believe how slow and how weak you feel. But you are not bonking. That's the altitude. Remember from episode 4 this season when Dr. Grissom was saying that for every 1,000 feet you climb at this altitude, there's a compounding effect on you.
Yeah.
That how much the change from 9 to 10,000 feet hits you isn't the same as how much it will later hit you from 10 to 11,000 feet.
Yeah. As you're going up, you've got to tell yourself, this isn't me. I'm not falling apart. My race isn't over. This is the altitude, and everyone is experiencing it. This weird fake bonk is what you paid for. It was the $450 check that you wrote back in January or whenever. Don't be demoralized. Just plug along the best you can. You're not going to be up here forever. And as you keep eating and drinking, your power is going to come back to you once you get off this mountain. Strongly recommend go back and listen to episode 4 this season. What Dr. Grissom said is, it's words of wisdom, and it is something you should keep in mind as you are beginning to despair going up Columbine Mine.
Yeah, it's just so easy to let this part of the race get in your head, but you don't have to. You just need to realize you're now, quote unquote, enjoying what makes this race so famous. One thing you will have to do at around mile 49 when you break through the tree line is get off your bike from time to time, 3 or 4 times for most people, and push that thing uphill in steep, loose, rocky double track. For this reason, shoe choice matters. So as part of your training in the next week or so, go find a steep trail, even if it's one you normally ride and clean, and push your bike up it for a few minutes. Get a sense of how your shoes do while hike-a-biking. And then find a good, comfortable position for how you handle your bike when you're off of it. Columbine is not the only place you'll need this tactic, so it's worth getting ready for.
Yeah, you're going to need that tactic again when you're going up the Powerline, that is for sure. For all of these hike-a-bike sections, it's even more important than before to stay on the right side of the trail because now you're on narrow double track and there are more people coming down and they are just as tired and barely lucid as you are. Encourage them if you can, and don't be resentful if they don't say anything back because they are probably just as being as focused as they can on not creaming you. And besides, it'll be your turn to be yelling encouragement at folks as you come down soon enough. And one last thing on these hike-a-bike sections. it takes a real force of will to not go into sort of a self-pitying survival mode. A lot of people who've been racing fast and hard are going to slow to a crawl. One thing Reba Rush hammered into my head during some of the clinics I took from her during, in the weeks before this race, is this is still part of the race. Walk with power, walk with purpose. If the person in front of you is defeated, ask them to let you by. You are racing. This is what you signed up for. Make yourself proud here. Okay, lecture over. The serious climbing for Columbine Mine ends at about mile 50, and you've got a few rocky but flat few minutes to compose yourself even as you pick your line around and through mud puddles and embedded rocks.
Then, amazingly, you actually go downhill for a few seconds, meaning you roll fast into the Columbine Mine aid station. You're at mile 51 now. The Columbine Mine, you've done it. You're halfway there. Now's a good time to take a look at your bike, computer, make sure, because most people find your turnaround time is a good predictor of your finishing time. The halfway point in distance is also very close to the halfway point in time for this race. Remember, though, this is an accomplishment. It's not the end of the race.
No.
You should not spend a lot of time here if you can help it. And whether it's a good idea to stop at the mine at all is a hotly debated topic.
Yeah, put me down on the don't stop unless you need food, water, or clothing side of this debate, Hottie. You are not going to catch your breath at 12,600 feet. And if you sit around for long, your legs are going to stiffen up, and then you turn around and you go up that little kicker of an uphill, and it turns into a real nasty surprise. I don't know if you have ever done that, but I've stopped and eaten like my fill of cantaloupe there at that aid station before, and it's so delicious, and I was so grateful for the break. And then I started riding again, and it felt like it felt like this impossibly steep little kicker of a climb. It's better just to get that thing over with.
Yeah, I agree. Make the turnaround, and if you do need to stop while you're on the top of the mountain, climb back out of the mine aid station area, and you'll be on top of a little crest. And there, you have to take a leak. You want to do a gel, and you need to stop to do any of that. You can stop up there, and then that'll lead you into the Columbine descent. So do what you got to do. But I would say roll through that aid station if you can. Fatty, I do have one question for you regarding Columbine.
Yeah.
Do you ride Columbine before race day, and what do you tell others about doing that?
I have in the past. Actually my best time up Columbine was on I think the week before. In order to avoid doing too much, I would not do it more any closer than 3 days before the race, and probably 4 or 5. Also, I think there is a psychological issue with doing that climb before, because you do the climb and you say to yourself, this isn't so bad. And then, because I have done Columbine and just cleaned it, where I didn't have to walk a single inch of the thing a week before the race. And I was like, well, this is, everyone makes such a big deal of this, and I'm super strong and this is easy. And then I didn't give it the respect it deserved on race day. And I find myself pushing, and I think something is wrong, and I'm not thinking until too late about the fact that it is a very different thing to be doing Columbine Mine with 40 miles of racing in your legs than doing it when you're completely fresh and that's the only thing you're riding that day. How about you?
Yeah, I have never climbed Columbine in preparation for the race, and I tell others it's really not necessarily. It's just a long climb. You're going to slog up it. Watch the video. You'll get to know what it's about. If you do absolutely have to go up that thing for peace of mind or whatever, drive. Get in a car. You can drive a lot of the way up that thing.
Yeah.
Take your bike with you. Get off where they make you get off. I think it's right where you come out of the trees. Right where it turns to the narrow double track, and you can ride the rest of the section. But save your legs for race day.
Yeah.
That climb will take a lot out of you, even if it's the only thing you do in a day.
Yeah. I will say that it is really nice to go to the top of the Columbine Mine on a day when you are not racing, because on race day, you don't get a chance to look over the other side of that mountain, and it is a remarkable view. It is really worth seeing, to see that little cabin, that broken down ruin of a cabin that is there, and then walk a few steps and look down the flip side of that mountain. It is an incredibly gorgeous mountain range and is worth taking a look at, but not on race day. On race day, you just want to get down.
And, of course, going down, you can't see anything either other than the trees blitzing by your peripheral vision, which is what we'll take on next time, the descent of Columbine, when we revisit the course. And now on to the course. Each week we are discussing a segment of the Leadville Out and Back format. We are doing the course in order. And we have currently reached the halfway point, the turnaround, the top of that Columbine climb. You've made it, 12,600 feet. It's all downhill from here, Fatty.
Not.
Oh, you're going to enjoy at least some of this descent coming up, but there's a lot of racing still ahead, including the descent itself. But first, let's talk, Fatty, about that turnaround. I think this is always worth revisiting, the turnaround. You hit the top of the Columbine climb, and there's an opportunity there to stop. There are people there. They have food. They're cheering. They're welcoming you.
Oh, yeah.
You got a little hollow. There's certainly a wide enough spot for a lot of people to pull over. The question is, do you stop or do you roll through? What does Fatty do when he reaches the top of Columbine?
There's a nice little cul-de-sac style roll through route, and I take that knowing that there is a volunteer as you exit who will hand you a cup of water and a goo. I take that goo, I take that water, I slug the water down, I eat the goo, and by the time I am finished, I am at that little pitch, that little kicker of an uphill that seems to be put there mostly as an insult to us racers.
Right.
We've been doing all this climbing, and the first thing we do after the turnaround is climb again for a couple hundred yards. But
you'll notice as you get to the top of the Columbine climb, you actually descend into the turnaround, and then that means, of course, you have to climb out of that thing.
Yeah.
And I, like you, Fatty, I've stopped once at the top of Columbine. That's because I was getting a flat, and that's the only time I've stopped. All the advice I ever received about that turnaround was do not stop, make the turn, climb back out, and as you crest that little climb you're talking about there, you can stop up there and do a goo if you need to.
Yep.
And then you can hit the Columbine descent. Does that sound like good advice?
I think that's perfect advice. And if you go back to the episode where we talked with Dr. Grissom, that was his advice as well. If you don't have to stop at the turnaround, don't. Get down. You're going to recover better at even 11,000 feet. The differences between 11 and 12,000 and 10 and 11, they're significant. And you are going to do better in the race if you can get down a little bit before you start trying, as soon as you possibly can.
Right. And then that takes you into the first part of the Columbine descent. You'll remember this part. You're going to remember all of it because you just went up it. And this first section here can be a bit tricky. There's some good fist-sized rocks. That's tight double track. You got to watch for the folks coming up because you're going to be going down. You got to keep your wits about you. There's a good chance that you're going to run into a slow rider. If you're at all a good descender, you're going to run into somebody you're going to need to pass or want to pass. You're going to want to do so carefully because this section is quite rocky, pitty. You'll probably remember a lot of it because you were walking up this section. So that means it's also steep. But you really got to watch yourself. You might be a little out of breath. You're obviously going to be out of breath because you're at 12,000 feet. So you really want to watch yourself in this section. Yes, you can pass, but you have to do so, Fatty, carefully in this area.
You do. You got to call it out, make sure that they know which side you are going on. I like to, instead of yelling out on your left or on your right, I like to just say, hold your line, because people are really dopey. As they are pushing their bikes up, they are every bit as non-lucid as you were a couple of minutes ago as you were pushing your bike up. It is, you forget the difference between left and right. You hear hold, move on your left and you move left, and people make those kinds of mistakes. So hold your line is unambiguous. It tells them to stay where they are and you get around them.
Mm-hmm. And this section probably takes a good 10 minutes or so to get down, and then you're going to get back into what I like to call the canopy section, the tree canopy section, the road that is going to widen out a lot more. It's going to become smoother, and I love to tell folks, and I do this myself, I just blast the section. As soon as I see those trees again, as soon as I see the shaded area again, I let those brake levers go. I just wrap my hands around those grips and let the bike go. Now, there's a couple of things you just want to remember here. It's not completely smooth going through the canopy section as you're flying down. There are some baby heads. Baby heads are like semi-buried rocks, and you certainly can, Fatty, hit those with a front wheel and send yourself offline.
That's right. And there are some brake bumps there, depending on the year. Sometimes there are very few of those. Sometimes it can be pretty chattery. But you want to watch for that, just like you would on any wide dirt road. And then, of course, because Leadville gets the sudden rainstorms, there can be running water that will create little erosion ruts that will go off the road or down the middle. And it's easy to get your wheels sucked into one of those if you're not paying attention. So don't just be looking 10 feet ahead of you. Always be looking 20, 30 feet ahead of you. It's a good idea just because, there are other people out there and there's, features of the road.
Yeah, but I encourage people, let the bike go. Let it run. You're going to want to run this section. It is fast. It's nice, quick. It's shaded. It feels good. It's nice to finally go downhill after spending, an hour plus going up the Columbine mine climb. I would say speeds reach over 30 miles per hour here, Fatty. I mean, you're going a pretty damn good clip. This is road bike stuff here as you're flying down Columbine.
Yeah, you can really get hauling. I would have to take a look at Strava to see what my top speed is. I never ever look at my GPS as I'm going down this part. I am looking at the road. I am paying attention to the people who are walking or riding their bikes up. There's, with 2,000 people, depending where you are in this procession, there's a good chance you will see people very nearly to the bottom of the Columbine descent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as you get near the bottom of the descent, you're going to run into some tight turns that hopefully you have recalled or stashed in your memory bank when you went up. They're tight. As you enter the turn, you're going to not quite do a 180, but pretty close to it, and it pitches down quickly. You just want to remember where those are. Be looking well through the corner so you don't overcook it. I did once and nearly had to come to a full stop because I was just going too hard through one of those corners, Fatty. They will come up and bite you if you're not careful. Right there at the bottom.
Yeah, 5 or 6 hairpins if I remember correctly. So you got to watch for those, and you are not done with the hairpins till really you come out of the trees and you are into the alternate aid station area at the bottom of Columbine.
Right. The alternate feed zone will greet you as you come out of the tree canopy. This is where some crews will set up and feed their racers. You're going to, again, hit that alternate feed zone. You're on a tight double track, and you're going to go through what I love this meadow. This meadow's only open on race day. It belongs to a rancher. It's private property. He's generous. He's kind enough to open it up to us on race day. It really is a pretty section of the ride. You get nice long views. And that's going to feed you back towards, now you're starting to head back towards the Twin Lakes Dam. But before you hit Twin Lakes, there's a little section here, again, tight, rocky double track that you've obviously already seen before, but it's a different look coming back. And, Fatty, this little section here always kicks my butt a little bit. I mean, there's some good kickers right here. The temperature's now up. You're getting warmer. You've been rolling along pretty fast here, and all of a sudden these little kickers come along before you hit Twin Lakes Dam.
Yeah, they hit you hard and fast for some reason, and I think personally what that reason is that you've been coasting for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, however long it took you to get from the top to the bottom of Columbine, and your legs have had a chance to sort of cool down a little bit, and suddenly you're going from not pedaling at all or pedaling very little to really having to ratchet it up. Also, a fair chance that if you didn't pay attention and look ahead and think about it, you may be in a pretty big gear when you hit one of those kickers and you wind up, really going to a low cadence as you try to get over the thing. Always good advice. Look ahead, be in a gear that is going to work for you so that you don't go burning a match when you don't need to.
So those kickers should come around mile 61. So now we're through our little kickers here, and you're going to come off them and descend right back to Twin Lakes Dam. Again, more chaos, a lot more people around you. A lot of you folks are going to take your feed. Now your inbound Twin Lakes feed will be taken here, either here or across on the other side of the dam. Boom, you're going to get through your chaos. You're on your bike. You're moving again. Now, as you come out of the dam area, you're back on. There's a little section of single track that's kind of nonsense, but it's there. And you're going to pop out of that little piece of single track, and you're going to be back on pavement. Now, this road climb, to me, Fatty, out of Twin Lakes Dam, is sneaky hard.
Oh, it is. I get the same effect. If it's a sunny day, and in Colorado, this time of day, good chance that the sun will be beating down on you, and things have warmed up, and your legs haven't necessarily warmed up from the big descent. Maybe you stopped and had something to eat, or had been, sucking down a gel or taking a bite or two of a sandwich, a rice cake as you go through the feed zone. For some reason, all of those things combine to make that little paved climb. I don't know how long it is, half a mile, not very big, but boy, I just find myself in the granny gear and see other people, with their heads, basically, their tongues on their handlebars trying to get through this thing and just suffer up this thing until they hit the dirt and can start rolling downhill again.
That said, folks, when I was pacing one of my buddies one year, Fatty and the Hammer both passed us in this section on single speeds. They were moving along nicely. So the paved section, just be ready for it. It's harder than it looks. You think, oh, I'm on pavement. It's harder. The sun's beating down on there a little bit. So you're going to go up. And by the way, there's people on that road too. So you're going to get some encouragement, especially near the top. There's always a nice group of people. I think they're locals. They sit right at the top of that paved climb. Now you're going to descend. You're going to be back on what I would call an improved dirt road. This road actually used to be a lot more washboardy, Fatty. I remember when the first year I did it, it used to be, now I hated that thing. You're rattling all over the place. But recently they have graded, at least last summer when I was there, it was a lot smoother. It was a much nicer ride. So you can really just rip down this thing. You might feel some breezes in here, and you're probably going into them at this point. But the good news is, as you hit the bottom of this long, and it's fairly long, improved gravel road, you're going to see some course marshals down at the bottom down there, and they're going to be signaling you onto what is certainly a relief on the Leadville Trail 100 course. The only real section of single track. A beautiful section, I might add, Fatty.
Yeah, a really nice single track. Backing up for just a second. On this wide, improved dirt road, as well as the short section of pavement that you're going to be on, if you can put a group together, it is a good place to work together again. So, sort of something to think about there. On the single track, like you say, Hottie, it is really nice to have a change of pace where you are not on, descending super fast down a rocky dirt, Jeep road. It is really nice to not be on pavement. It is nice as a mountain biker to be on a piece of single track. And there is, you're kind of flying through some sagebrush. You are flying through a little bit of tree covered single track with some roots and some rocks, and it's fun and it's not super long, so enjoy it while you can.
Yep. The only thing I could say about it is it's a little hard to pass here because it's tight and off to the side of the single track, it's just shrub. It's sagebrush, so it's hard to kind of move around people there. You're really going to have to ask people to move aside for you. This direction, we're going inbound. It's going to be uphill, so you'll be climbing this. You've done the downhill portion, all right? You got to climb back out on this piece of single track. But again, really an enjoyable piece. Now, as you come out of the single track, you top out onto a little plateau, and you're back on some double track here. This puts you into what I like to start calling pipeline inbound. I mean, pipeline, I think, is a longer section than people realize. It's this huge, presumably there's a pipe running under the ground somewhere, and that's where it got the name pipeline. But initially what happens is you end up on this double track. that has some pretty nasty kickers to it. I mean, you weave your way through, you go downhill a little bit, and then pretty soon you're just going to have to dip. You're going to have to climb back up to the next plateau, Fatty. And I can't remember how many. There's 2 or 3 of them that I recall, but one in particular, which we were scrambling for the nickname here before the show, but one in particular is quite steep, and you'll probably have to walk it.
Yeah. The single track that you were just talking about actually was created to go around the worst of those kickers because so many people had been injured on that descent. So there is one fewer than there used to be, but I think there are still a couple of them. And one of them is called Clavicle Hill, if I remember right.
Uh-oh.
And because it is, if you hit it with too much speed or, grab a little bit of brake, it's easy to endo. And of course, downhill, it can hurt. At this point in the race, of course, it is pure uphill. And you will see some brave souls who do their level best to ride up that thing. And it is possible. I have ridden up that on a not race day. On race day, I don't even try. As soon as I get into my granny gear and find that I am starting to, feel my heart kind of creeping up into the red zone, I swing my leg off and I push. I don't feel any need to burn a match on this hill.
Yeah, me too. I hit the bottom of that thing. I might carry a little speed up the first eighth of it or something, and I'm off and walking, and it's fine. There's actually usually somebody at the top of that climb stationed up there, again, offering pushes, offering encouragement. It's great. Once you're done with that clavicle hill, we'll call it, you're going to do some nice long down and ups. They're kind of big, long switchbacks. They're really nice, actually.
Yeah.
You carry a lot of speed down to the bottom of these washes or where these maybe creeks run into, and you make hard right-hand turns and you climb right back out of them. You might do that. I think there's a couple of sections just like that. And eventually, you'll be pointed straight back towards the pipeline feed zone. Pretty much a straight, long, straight drag. It's tree line for the most part, but long and straight. And the real deal here is it's a little downhill going back to pipeline feed, but the problem is there's usually a headwind, Fatty, in this section, and you got to be ready. You were talking about finding people back on that improved dirt road. Here's another spot. I think if you've got 2 or 3 people around you, get with them, because going back to pipeline feed, you're likely to find some wind in your face.
Oh, yeah. You're on what people call the flat section of the course, and of course, it's never truly flat. But with a headwind, you definitely want to work together with anyone that you can put together, put a group together with. And if you can hold that group together through the pipeline and onto the pavement, which is what we'll be talking about next time, you'll be really glad you did, because that pavement with a headwind, oh, so brutal, so brutal.
So you're back at pipeline feed, folks. It's mile 73. You just got the 30 more to go. Next week in our course segment of the show, we will talk you through the short but crucial section of road that will bring you to the crux of the race, the Powerline climb. And now on to the course. Each week we are discussing a segment of the Leadville Out and Back format. We've been doing the course in order, and we have reached the pipeline feed zone, and the finish is starting to become a reality. But first, pavement and headwind.
Oh, yeah.
Leaving pipeline at mile 73, you have just over 30 miles left in this race. This is your last opportunity to get aid from your crew, and you have a lot of work to do in the last quarter of this race. 2 big climbs and a small climb that will feel like a big climb.
Yeah, we're getting maybe a little bit ahead of ourselves here, but because if there's one place that feels extra hard to get going from, it is this aid station. You're tired by now. And there is this weird mental thing of knowing you have the hardest part of the race ahead of you, but also feeling at the same time like you should have had the hardest part of the race behind you. Columbine feels like it ought to have been the hardest part of the race. Knowing that there's something even harder freaks you out, as part of our tagline for this show.
Yep. People say about the pipeline moving forward, moving inbound, your race starts there. But before you even get to the Powerline climb, which is going to be in a future show, you got to hit this very short segment of the race that feels like a big park. Word to the wise here. Look for groups.
Yeah, this is a good place to do that. And first thing you're going to do is be on the short single track before you get onto the pavement. Gather that group if you can while you're on the dirt. Keep eating and drinking no matter what. Being fueled ahead of when you get to the power line may well be the single most important thing you can do during this race. So many times I've watched a sub 9 hour finish slip through my fingers because I let the race get into my head while on this section instead of fueling for what you could call the final exam for this race.
Right. So you're going to come out of the pipeline feed zone here. You actually go through a little wash. It's kind of rocky and nasty. You pop out and you end up on some double track. And you've been on this section of the course already going outbound. I actually like the double track section. I don't know why I love just screaming down that thing every time. Really getting it in a big gear and just ramming towards the pavement.
You can fly through there. And yeah, warming your legs back up is a good idea.
Yeah. You'll hit the end of that double track and you're going to make a left turn back onto the pavement. Here, you're looking for new friends, or maybe old friends, maybe people you've been with already.
Anyone.
Because something's going to happen here. It's almost guaranteed that you're going to see some type of headwind as you make the left onto the pavement.
I'm reaching back into my mental archive. I don't think I have ever done this section where it is not a demoralizing headwind. It's probably happened because you don't notice no wind, but you do notice a hard crosswind and a hard headwind. But this, I mean, it practically brings you to a stop. And, that's, of course, compounded by the fact that you are tired.
Mm-hmm. And it's a little uphill.
Yep, that's true. So I don't know why it's true, but it is. I'm sure that a weather professional could tell us. But this section gets into my head so bad. It feels like you were hardly moving. I have cramped on this road. I have actually thrown up on this road. Rebecca Rush has given me electrolyte capsules on this road. I am pretty sure that I have cried on this road. I've been dropped by Tyson Apostle, who is the winner of the reality show Survivor on this road. He was trying to give me a pull, but as a former professional cyclist, he just rode me off his back wheel. Yeah. I never had a chance.
Yeah, look at the thing on paper. You pull out your maps. You're going, it doesn't seem like a big deal. And maybe that's what makes it so effective at demoralizing racers, because they go into it going, well, what the hell? I should be able to do this fine. Well, I'll just go on the pavement. If everything is going to be fine. In fact, a buddy of mine who I'm going to talk a little bit about later in our crewing section, he did the same thing you did. He found himself on the side of that road out of sorts. Like he didn't know where he was or where he needed to go. He finally came to and squeezed in under the line, just barely under 9 hours to get a gold buckle. But he thought he was done for out there. So leave nothing to chance out there, and do not underestimate, I should say, this section of road. Coming off the double track, you're going to make a left. You're going northbound. As you're going northbound and uphill and into the wind, and again, hopefully you're with 5, 6, 10, whatever it takes, and everyone's sharing work. You want to, guys aren't sharing work here. Encourage people to share work. It does no good to have a guy on the front in a headwind taking a 5-minute pull. It doesn't work.
Well, and he's going to slow down imperceptibly, and he's going to become a less effective engine to your train. People take 30-second pulls. If you have a group of more than 3 people, you shouldn't be out there with some person being a hero.
Yeah. No one is going to get a gold buckle on this section of road. This is not where it happened. You could only lose it here. And again, I saw my buddy nearly lose his whole day on the side of this road. The last thing I'll say, Fatty, about this section, this northbound section, is just be prepared for cars to be coming by you. And they might come by quickly. So just watch your lane a little bit. You might want to just favor the right side.
Sure. They're anxious to get to their racers. These are people who are hot-footing it from the Twin Lakes Dam to get to the pipeline before the racer gets there in just under an hour. They got to move fast, so they may not be paying attention. Stay on the right side of the road. You'll be fine.
So you're going to make a left-hand turn coming up here. You're going northbound into the wind. Again, hopefully you have a group. You're going to make a left-hand turn, and then your wind will probably be cross here, and you'll be going My bearings always get a little messed up in Leadville. Are you going west then? Yeah, you'd be going westbound because you're going northbound, headed to the road, you make a left, you're going west, and now you're going towards the trout fishery area.
Yep, to the fish hatchery.
Fish hatchery, that's right.
Yeah, great little place to go maybe during the week where before the race, look at all the fish. That's where Lisa dropped her phone into the trough and rescued it 15 minutes later. Still worked. Got a picture of the fish trough from the bottom of that trough. Nice. Amazing. A little unpaid endorsement for the iPhone 8 there. So there's a good chance you'll have a crosswind, might be a cross headwind. No matter what, when you make that left turn, keep working together. Once again, don't be the ox. Don't be the dumb ox that pulls everyone.
Yep. Some bumps in the road that could split your group coming up here. So as you go past the fish hatchery, the road course, as I'll call it here, starts to undulate a little bit. And that can cause some issues for guys who've been hopefully trying to hold a steady pace. I know when you get little risers, little kickers, that can cause some issues. It's okay. Look back, grab another helper, be efficient here, save something for what's ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Because actually, once you hit those little bumps in the road past the fish hatchery, you're not too far off now from the major objective of the day. The funny thing here is, though, as you near the Powerline climb, straight ahead is downtown Leadville.
Yeah.
Home is straight ahead.
It is
but
so tempting.
You must make a left turn here.
That's right. And a course marshal is going to wave you left onto the dirt. Use that as a cue to look at the mileage on your GPS. This is very important to me. It should say pretty close to 79 on the nose, but make sure that what your bike computer says it is, because, little variations between different GPSs. Knowing that number is my personal key to keeping my sanity on what we're going to talk about in the next episode of The Course.
And now, as always, we go onto the course, the Leadville course. Each week, we are discussing a segment of the Leadville out and back format. We've been doing this in order, and so far we've made it through the last major feed at Pipeline, and now, after 79 miles, the race has begun because it is Powerline time. Your goal will now be decided right here, right now.
It's funny that you say, after 79 miles, your race has begun, because that is so absolutely 1,000% true. This is the most physically and mentally demanding part of the course. It is super easy to actually have your body stop working for you and to get demoralized. But it's also a place where you can have, moments of elation and exuberance that you are going to beat this thing, that you are going to finish this race. So, there's no way we can avoid building this thing up and making it sound big, because the fact is it is big. And all those matches that in other installments of the course segment that we've been telling you to save, it is time to get those matches out. You're going to be burning match after match after match on this 4-mile segment.
Yeah, you're going to light a fire here, and knowing the course and knowing what you're in for and how to tackle it is really going to help. This section requires riding and walking, knowing when to do which.
Yeah, and sometimes it is hard to tell. If a good way for you to be able to get a sense for what parts you can ride, which parts you can walk, although, of course, it's going to change when you're doing this with 80 miles of riding in your legs. But if you get to Leadville 5 or more days before the race, go and pre-ride this. It is more important to pre-ride the Powerline than it is to pre-ride Columbine. Caveat, if you get to Leadville 4 or fewer days before the race, don't go pre-riding anything big like this. You don't need to load your legs up with this kind of a climb 3 days before the race, right?
Yeah, not at all. I would stay off of both of those big climbs inside of 4 days before the race.
All right. Well, let's get to it. You are going to take a left off the pavement and take a look at your GPS. You should be at mile 79 on the nose.
But, once again, check your GPS to see if there's a little variance on your own machine. I say this because from the left turn, it is exactly 4 miles from here to the summit. Look at your GPS, add 4 to that number. That number is your goal. It is so good to know this number because there's going to come a time during the next however long it takes you to get up there that you are going to believe you are at the top, that you must be at the top. This feels like the top, but you are not at the top.
Yeah, we're talking a lot of false flats here. A lot of you think you're there, but you're not. It happens again and again and again. And if you somehow miss checking this mileage marker Fatty's giving you, the summit is going to be at mile 83 for any well-calibrated GPS.
Yep.
But we're not at 83 just yet. We're at 79, and these are 4 very tough miles. You made that turn off the pavement, and for about 4/10 of a mile, it's actually not that bad. In fact, there's people around you.
Yeah.
You're going to go through what used to be a creek. It's no longer. They actually filled it in now. So good dry spot. You make a right, again, or on dirt at this point. Lots of people around, lots of cheering. Then a left, and you'll be following that fence line. It was on your right as you came down the power line. Nice fence line. I love that fence, in fact. It looks very westerny there. But now you're going up the fence line again. This gradient so far, Fatty, not that bad.
No, it's not too bad. You will perhaps remember it from earlier in the morning when it was nice and cool and your legs were fresh, and you finished coming around that bend, and you're on this straight downward slope that you could just open up your brakes and get to maybe your top speed on dirt for the whole day right there, just because it is a nice long straightaway. Now you're going to discover why you were going so fast, because it sort of slowly creeps up and the grade gets really tough. It's not bad yet, but you are going to find yourself in a lower gear than you would have expected because, of course, altitude and exhaustion. You are 80 plus miles now into this race, but you can stay on your bike for now.
Right. And Fatty, maybe this is a good time to answer a question I'm sure a lot of people are asking themselves about us and about anybody. Have you ever cleaned Powerline? The answer for me is no. I've never even really tried to clean the Powerline climb. How about you?
I have cleaned the Powerline climb, not during a race. While pre-riding, a few years ago, Rebecca Rush and I took a good-sized group out there, and I had great legs that year. That was the year that I did an 8:12 at Leadville, so it was the best that I've ever been. And we started going, and it was the only climb we did that day. It was just to show off the Powerline. And I was the person, Rebecca was sort of taking up the back. I was taking out the front. And with all those people around me, I decided I was going to give it what I had to give. And I cleaned it. I cleaned the entirety of the Powerline.
Yeah, I think a lot of first-timers, even strong riders, get a little obsessed with this. Like, I got to somehow clean Powerline, or that's somehow some kind of benchmark as to how fast you're going. Remember this, folks. Dave Weens walks Powerline.
Yeah.
Rebecca Rush on race day walks Powerline. There's very few people on race day that can clean this thing. Usually it's pros. I actually had one guy when I was crewing that year, Fatty, who finished under 8 hours, and he was a monster. This guy was a beast on the bike. He cleaned Powerline. He's one of like a handful of guys I personally know that can clean that thing on race day. In fact, I think it took so much out of him, he hasn't been back. So
yeah.
I start thinking about walking, getting off the bike long before I even have to get off the bike, because I know that cleaning Powerline is not within me. I'm not going to even try. Probably going to burn way more trying to do it than just getting off and walking. It's just going to cost you just too much.
Yeah.
Just attempting. It's really not worth it. You're probably just going to throw everything away there trying to clean that thing, as opposed to getting off and walking and just managing it and picking up or making up your time somewhere else. So, Fatty, that's why I start thinking about when I will get off before I have to.
Yeah. There are definitely better places to burn your matches, than on that incredibly steep section that begins right after you sort of curve around in a clockwise left sort of luge shoehorn. Where every time I go past that now, I think about one year there was a guy that Leadville legend Ricky McDonald, a friend of his, had come, and just a big guy in his blue jeans overalls, sitting on a stump or on a log and playing his banjo the whole day, so that everyone who rode by just saw this old guy, this old country guy playing his banjo just beautifully, playing it beautifully. And it was such a strange image, but also a really great image, and some music and some guy playing for you as you got to this impossibly steep section of the ride to climb. And I keep hoping that guy will come back someday.
So Fatty mentioned the luge section. That comes right after, you've come up the fence line, you're going to make a left, and now you're in what this I like to call the luge section as well. There's these sweeping turns that are banks. The ruts, the other thing comes back in here are the ruts. So you're going to see the ruts. Now, through that luge section, Fatty, I'm usually still on at this point, but I'm already contemplating the spot I want to get off. Again, there's no shortage of encouragement here.
Yeah.
You're going to see a lot of people around you, and they're all going to be encouraging you to stay on your bike. But I try to shut those people out. And as I come out of that luge section and still trying to dance between a couple of ruts, you start to crest up a little bit, and you're going to make a left, and the power poles are going to come into view. Usually I'm still on at this point, but as those power poles come into view, as I can start to see up the line of power poles that should be on the left side of the trail at this point, and the power lines are buzzing over my head, that's when I decide, okay, time to get off, and it's time to start hoofing it.
Yeah. I have never counted those power poles. It's interesting that you know exactly how many there are. I'm aware that they're there, and there's, sometimes the sound of that hum that is just a little bit disconcerting. But the way that I decide it's time to get off is when I just, I can tell that it is costing me more than it's earning me, right? So I'm just, that's when it's time to get off. I love, by the way, as you get into this section, this pushing section, and it's a painful time, and you're going so slow, and it's such high effort. And I mean, you're really leaning forward almost comically as you're slowly marching your bike up this incredibly steep hill. There are a lot of people out there just doing nice little things. There's usually someone or a group of people out there handing Dixie cups of water or Coke. There's a guy almost every year wearing a pizza slice costume, the pizza guy, who on hot days I've had him with a backpack mister running alongside riders and spraying them with that mister. Just nice little things and kind of, giving you encouragement in kind of an awesome way. It's a great vibe and a great way to kind of encourage people who are frankly suffering pretty hard up this race.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, walking is suffering in this case. I've never timed this walking section, so I can't even give people a good estimate of how long it takes.
It's forever long is how long it is.
Yeah, depending on where you're going to remount. Here's something to be careful of, though. While we said that most people will not be cleaning Powerline, and it's not a great idea for most people, that you're likely to have somebody coming up from behind you trying to ride this section. So just be careful there, and they should be shouting out, or some of the fans or the people lining the Powerline section will probably yell to you that, hey, rider back or rider. Just listen for that and be cognizant that people could be coming up behind you. Fatty, do you have any type of tactic or any type of way that you like to walk up this section? Do you like to stand on top of those or walk on top of the ruts and try to get your bike across the other side of the rut? Is there a way you like to do it? Do you like a side of this section here?
I can't profess any tactic. I'm not thinking smart enough to do anything like that. I am always to the left of my bicycle. I'm more comfortable that way. Beyond that, I would say that I am more likely to try to be, high. If there is either my bike or I am going to have to be lower or higher than the other, I'd rather have my bike be lower than me. Up to a point, unless I'm having to, bend over to get to it. I'm just trying to make it easier. I don't have any clever ideas. How about you, Hottie? You got anything on this one?
I think like going down Powerline, going up, you want to just stay out of the ruts. And that can be tricky because sometimes that means you're going to be standing on one side of a rut or walking on one side. Your bike might be on the other. It could be a little tricky. So I think that's just like a general rule as you're walking up. Like we said, I look for that third power pole. And I try to walk to that third power pole. And generally, that's where I'm going to get on again. In between the bottom section of the top, usually there's 2 soda hand-ups going on between there. It's either going to be root beer or Pepsi or Coke. I forget what those volunteers hand out there.
Take anything I get.
I take anything I get, too. I'll take a push. Some people will help push, especially people who are pedaling. Usually we'll get a push.
Oh, yeah.
So about that third power pole, I'll try to jump back on again, provided I've recovered. Sometimes I'll even stop and just take a few deep breaths right there and just kind of let things. Because the walking your heart rate will stay up surprisingly high as you're walking.
You're working plenty hard. You're still racing. You're just doing it a different way.
Yeah, and then getting back, of course, remounting on an incline like that is always tricky. I think I always upshift a little bit, put that thing in some extra gear, so it's just a little harder than you would want it to be normally. Just to get your bike moving and moving forward again. Again, about that third power pole, I'm going to get on. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that, mostly which is because it's not quite as steep here at the third power pole, and because this is when a lot of the bad terrain really starts to disappear. The thing about the Powerline is the way they cut those power poles, they go straight down the mountain. And to access them, they had to cut a road, right? They had to cut something up so vehicles could get up or something, and then the rains come down and they tear up that access road, and it turned into a rutted mess after a while.
Yeah.
And so it's about that third power pole where I find the terrain, the dirt itself improves enough so that I can remount and start pedaling a little bit. It's still steep, but the grip is just a little bit better. And again, I start pushing ahead. And, of course, the first thing you're going to run into, Fatty, is one of those things we already talked about, a false summit.
Yeah.
About mile 80. It's a bona fide downhill after that, but that false summit will fool you.
Yeah, that little downhill is only for a second. Yeah, and don't believe that your eyes are telling you that this is it, because the majority of the climb, you're only a mile 80 of 8, you're climbing to 83, so you've got a lot to go. You are looking at 11,200 feet. That's the altitude that you are pushing to. It's high enough that you are going to lose some power for sure.
Yeah, a lot of people talk about the top of Columbine as being this point of no return, but a real desperation point. But the Powerline is not to be fooled with. I think if there wasn't a Columbine out there, everyone would talk about how high Powerline is, and you go over it twice. So there's a lot to deal with, and that's why you're going to notice. Well, you're going to notice a couple things as you remount, or where I remount at least, at that third power pole and start to move on forward. Is you're going to lose the fan support. The fans only make it up so far. There'll be a few more up there scattered about, but you're going to lose a lot of the crowd. But it just becomes this solitary thing. It's you, your bike, your breathing, and maybe a couple of other riders from here on forward, Fatty.
Yeah, it's a little bit meditative. Just you, your bike, the suffering, your breathing, and the sound probably of your chain grinding at least just a little bit. You've been riding in likely dry conditions for a long time. Chances are your drivetrain isn't going to sound perfect anymore. I've seen people, I've been caught by people here. I have caught people here. Generally, there is not, I don't care about those people as they go by, and I encourage them, congratulations. And it tends to be mutual. There's just a lot of respect for everyone on the course at this point that you have done this. I will say that once I've got back on the bike, even on a single speed, it's possible to clean the rest of this. You just have to gauge, is this worth doing? And also ask yourself the question, am I on the verge of a cramp? And if so, then, some little grunt that you normally would go ahead and do, maybe consider walking it so that you don't send yourself over the edge and into the cramps. I have been locked up with both legs cramping, hams, quads, and calves, just completely debilitated on this climb before. And if that does happen, and, if it's a hot day and if you were exhausted and you've been pushing yourself, evaluate what you can do. Can you walk at that time? If you can you're still moving, and that's better than not moving, right? If not, Can you eat and drink? Because those are going to help with the cramps. It might be a hydration-induced cramp. Do you have stuff to help you with cramps, like pickle juice? One of the things from the feed that I've been talking about, and I'll talk about a little bit more as we get into our sponsorship spot for the feed. Electrolyte capsules. I ate a bunch of those right before I got to the Cold to Crush at the Crusher last year, and I always take a handful of those right before I turn off the pavement to the Powerline to sort of stave off any kind of cramp.
Yep. Catching people and being caught, as both happened to me here, Fatty, as you just mentioned. I was actually caught by Eldon Fatty Nelson on this one year. I think you were on your single speed, too. Yeah, I was grinding out of that thing, and I heard you come by, and I yelled out your name or something like that, and you grunted and kept going and just nodded a lot. Yeah. And I've caught people here. I've caught people I was pacing here. I've caught teammates here, so it can go both ways. This is just a very tough section, and everyone kind of reacts to it differently. Like Fatty said earlier, you go over a false flat, and after that false flat and that downhill, this is pretty much a climb for most of the way. Yeah, some steep, rocky sections that will definitely test you. You're probably going to remember them from going down, too. And they were tough going down in the morning, just what it took to navigate them. Now, going up, again, you're going to have to move your bike around quite a bit, considering this is just a climb and you just want to climb straight ahead. You're going to be prepared. You have to be prepared to maneuver your bike a little bit because there can be some big rocks left on this top section of Powerline. So, again, steep, rocky sections, low speeds, walk if you need to, but keep riding if you can. I've had pretty good success here riding. Again, don't crash. I mean, you don't want to fall over. Don't ride at the expense of falling over. But if you can keep moving forward, pedaling, staying on your bike, that's great. While you don't get too excited, though, because, again, there's some false summits. It's a little hard to tell exactly when you're at the top. Even though you've already seen this section of the course, you're going to be duped into thinking, oh, around that corner, I'm at the top. Not quite. Pay attention to that odometer, like Fatty said. You're looking for that mile 83. And again, take advantage of the moments where you are briefly going flat or downhill. It does level off at times real quick. Eat, drink. This is the hardest part of the race for sure, and it's not easy to keep fueling, so you kind of got to keep focusing on that while you're in this section here. But you've got 2 more climbs ahead of you after you're done with the Powerline, after you're done with this one. So it's important now to keep kind of topping off those fuels. You're hearing people talk about this in the Tour de France. They're topping off his fuels. They talk about this in the Tour de France all the time. It's no different here. You want to just keep topping off so you're ready for those climbs just ahead of you.
Yep. What you do now is going to affect how the climbs ahead of you are going to go for you. So, little good news, just in case we've truly freaked you out about this part of the race. The final mile to the summit is considerably easier than the 2.5 miles that you've just ridden. There are still some steep momentary grunts, and you'll remember them as you get to them. But getting from mile 82 to mile 83 is a lot easier than mile 81 to 82. And when you get to mile 83, congratulate yourself, because you have just finished with what is without question the crux of the race, the toughest part of the race. You've climbed about 2,000 feet to 11,200 feet in 4 miles, with 80 miles of racing already in your legs. That is not nothing. That is a pretty legit accomplishment.
But don't pack your back for too long, because you've got 20 more miles of racing ahead of you, starting with the rocky Sugarloaf descent, which is what, along with Hagerman's, and the climb to Carter 8 is what we'll talk about next time on the course. And now on to the course. Each week we have been discussing a segment of the Leadville out and back format. We've been doing the course in order, and currently we have reached the top of the ever so lovely Powerline climb. We're now ready, that is, for a much, much needed descent. From mile 83 until mile 88 and a half, we are going downhill. And then we have what I like to say is the worst paved climb ever.
I love that climb. I really do. I
I understand why you and, frankly, probably 90% of the field out there hates that climb. But for those of us who fit in this tiny little Venn diagram intersect of strong climbers and endurance junkies, it's a little slice of hell-flavored heaven. And, of course, we're getting ahead of ourselves here. Let's rewind back to mile 83, where we've just crested the Powerline. And, of course, we're weeping with relief and joy and probably cramps in our hamstrings. So, yeah, at that top section, you are very briefly on easy double track, just sort of maybe barely rolling downhill, just long enough to catch your breath. Take a quick drink and eat something. Eat something, because you are going to be climbing again amazingly soon. You don't. It seems like you have just downhill forever, but it doesn't last long. What you do now is going to be the difference between a good Turquoise Lake road climb and what Hottie has, a miserable one.
The Sugarloaf descent is a section of the course I really do like, as I like the climb. You remember this going outbound. This is the part of the trail that a lot of us think is the best part of the day, especially in the morning when it's still kind of wet out.
Yep.
The sun is coming up, so it's absolutely beautiful. It's a little different by afternoon time, certainly. It's drier. It's going to be hotter. And now it's downhill, and on a normal day when you're fresh, you'd be guaranteed to have fun in this section of the course. It's pretty. There are fun lines to find. It's certainly rough in certain sections, but nothing a mountain bike can't manage. When you're 84 miles into this race, though, it is not just pretty tough. It's tough. This is hard. It's going to be really hard on your body. Expect a workout on those triceps and forearms especially. I mean, if your hands and forearms and triceps aren't a little achy already, they will be by the time you get to the bottom of this baby. Stay focused, because this is an easy place to get a flat or have a crash. And with everything you've done to get this far, you definitely do not want to end your day with a crash or a smash or your face into some rocks on the Sugarloaf descent. Fatty, this is one of those spots, though, where it does bring up the Leadville dilemma. Hardtail versus squishy.
Oh, that is the question that is at the forefront of my thoughts constantly right now. I've been going through a huge struggle trying to decide this question. I've been hitting some PRs with my climbs lately, and earlier this week I actually KOM'd a local trail, which does not happen that often. And all of these PRs and the KOM were always on my hardtail, on my felt doctrine. And as you know, I'm a standing climber. I have been for years. It's kind of burned into my brain from a lot of years of single speeding. However, for this particular section, coming down Sugarloaf, the argument for the full suspension epic is pretty darn strong. It is definitely the difference between surviving and thriving on this segment. And unlike, and especially since you can kind of plow through and over a lot of these embedded rocks, it's going to make it nice. So in my head, unless something goes wrong with the epic during the Breck race, I'm going to be on the full suspension bike. For this section, as well as just, because I expect to have, with 6 days of riding in my body, I'm going to be appreciating any kind of comfort that I can get. But back to this race, you can use the whole trail, unlike when you're coming down Columbine, and finding the line is half the fun.
Yeah, the two-way traffic is gone at this point, so the trail is all yours. And whether you're riding full suspension or a hardtail with just a front fork, Sugarloaf will point out the reason why you need to pay close attention to sag and air pressure. So fork sag and suspension sag, and making sure that's set up properly. I know that most of Leadville just seems like you could roll over it on a rigid bike, and you can. But Sugarloaf is one of those spots that suspension really will help you go much faster. And setting up your suspension, it's no good to have suspension unless it's set up properly. So do yourself a favor while you're in Leadville that week of getting ready, or if you're traveling up in the days before, just recheck that sag and that fork and shock, if you have a shock, air pressure, and make sure it's dialed just perfectly for you. Now, the Sugarloaf descent, Fatty, is an interesting mental switch, or it has been for me, because you go from a mind-numbing climb, that is, on Powerline to a spot where speed and focus on your line really becomes an issue. So you've got to throw the switch because you can be kind of be a little dead-brained as you're coming off that Powerline climb, and suddenly you're looking for lines, watching for rocks, dealing with switchbacks.
Yeah.
The light has certainly changed on you. So there's a lot of different things you have to key on as you're coming on. Your senses, you want to make sure your senses really come alive as you hit the Powerline, or rather the Sugarloaf descent. Initially, it's fine because you kind of roll as you come off Powerline, but before you know it, you're going to be into some switchbacks. They're not hard switchbacks; they're more gradual, but they can be loose, especially if it's been dry in Leadville and in the surrounding mountains. Any moisture you may have seen there again from the morning, probably going to be gone. The good news is, again, you won't have any two-way traffic. You might be catching people, or people might be catching you. You have to watch for people in front of you and behind you as you're moving past. But there won't be people coming the opposite way, which is great. After those turns, you're just going to have a straightaway from that. That straightaway, though, in fact, that straightaway, you can almost see the bottom of the climb. Once you hit it, Hagerman will be off to your right, and you can nearly see the bottom of it. There's a lot of trees, and the trees kind of prevent full peripheral vision of what's going on. But you'll be able to see almost the bottom. To deal with that descent, though, that last section there, it is very rocky. And here's a spot where, again, you could blow a tire pretty easy, wreck, something bad could happen. So focus really on that bottom part of Sugarloaf.
Yeah, keep your eyes forward and pay attention. And as you say, you're in that straightaway, and toward the very end of that, you're going to be able to see far enough ahead that you'll be able to see the course marshal. And that course marshal is going to be waving at you and indicating a hairpin of a right turn. This means that you are at mile 85 and on Hagerman's Pass. By the way, Hottie, you notice I just said Hagerman instead of Hagerman, which is what I've been saying this entire podcast. That is because I bothered to text Cole Klober, the son of Ken Klober, today. And he grew up in Leadville, and he said that you, Hottie, have been pronouncing it correctly, that the locals call it Hagerman, even though I maintain it is spelled Hagerman. Anyway, it means that I have to rewire my brain after pronouncing it Hagerman for more than 20 years. So if we had bet, I'd owe you a 20 right now.
That's okay. You can pay me in some other way. Hagerman, yes, Hagerman is a relief site. Obviously, suddenly now you're onto a much wider road. You can turn off all that focus I told you about picking a right line because it is wide. It's washboardy, but it's wide. But the only thing about Hagerman is now that you're on Hagerman, gravity will be less of a help. You'll probably be pedaling at this point as you head down towards the pavement.
Yep, pedaling and on a real washboardy road. And it's definitely we keep mentioning pedaling. It is a serious working downhill, very chattery. It seems like as wide and as gentle of a slope as it is, that you ought to be able to take a moment to eat, and I generally don't eat when I am on going down Hagerman's. It's just I'm going fast, and the road is so washboardy. You try to get a gel up to your face and wind up putting it in your nose. It's just no fun. If you've got a Camelback, it's a good segment to drink. Otherwise, maybe hang tight for just a couple miles because you're going to have a much better opportunity to eat and drink very, very soon.
So we're at mile 86.8, meaning you've been on this wide dirt downhill, Hagerman, for just under 2 miles. And you're going to see another course marshal waving you to make a left.
Yeah, and it's a very serious left. As soon as you see this marshal, start scrubbing your speed because this is a hard, sharp, downhill hairpin, your second hairpin in 2 miles. And this time you are going to be going downhill onto pavement, and I have personally witnessed the aftermath of someone bringing too much heat into this turn, high-siding it at the apex of that turn, and ending his race with an ambulance ride. Just 17 miles from the finish line. Incredible shame. So word to the wise, take this corner safe, then build your speed back up.
Once you have safely made this turn onto Turquoise Lake Road, you have a fast downhill, and this is a spot where, unlike Hagerman, you can reach in the pocket, and grab something to eat. It's about 1.5 miles. You'll be, actually not just fast, but I'd say screaming downhill. I mean,
Yes.
You can get a tuck. You can get one of those Tour de France tucks. What are they calling those tucks now where you sit on the top tube?
The super crouch, I think I've heard it called.
Yeah, the super tuck. That's what it is. Look, I'm not endorsing that thing.
Do not do that.
Again, what you really want to do is not focus so much on your tuck here, but grabbing something out of your pocket, drinking, eating, because this is a good spot to do it. You can definitely ride with one hand here if you need to do it that way. Watch the road surface, though. There are potholes. I mean, again, if you can eat and kind of keep an eye on the road, that's probably not a bad idea because there's some obstacles here to be mindful of while you're eating one-handed and trying to take into jail. As you bottom out on the cement section, on this paved section, you have reached the May Queen campground. And then you have a sweeping right-hand turn. And then you go up to the climb that I hate.
I know you do. A lot of people do. And as I said at the beginning of the course today, I love this climb. I really, I look forward to this climb. When I went out to do the Silver Rush 50, the day after, Lisa and I went and we did this climb. It's part of the Turquoise Lake Loop and is worth doing just on its own merits. But I actually really extended myself, set a PR on my road bike, which turns out you can go a lot faster on a road bike when you haven't got 85 miles of racing in you going up that hill. So it's a place where people like me, people who love the long, hard climbs, can make up ground to the people that on the people that we've lost time to, like you, as you were blowing by us on Sugarloaf. Mm-hmm. And there are a few things that can help any racer make the best of this road climb, whether you like it, like me, or not, like Hottie. First, know the distance. It's 2.7 miles, but just tell yourself it's 3 because it's hard to remember decimals. So 3 miles. It's 3 miles starting at that sweeping right after the campground. Hottie just described it. And that includes 1 or 2 easy recovery spots, one very brief downhill, in fact, for a sec, that you're going to make some good time and improve your average. My point is, this is not pure grind. It's just 3-ish miles, and you're climbing just about 700 feet. It doesn't sound like that much when you're talking about it like this. But yeah, a lot of people really feel just demolished by the time they hit this, and this is a climb that gets into your head. What I like to do is remind myself that it's really no more than just 3/4 of one of the local climbs I do all the time, the Suncrest climb. It's, which is 4 miles, 1,200 feet. I've done that a million times, and I understand it very well. And I recommend trying to find something like that for yourself, something that takes the mystique and seeming endlessness out of this climb, get it out of your head, map it to something at home that you're familiar with and have conquered many times. Just tell yourself, this is just that. This is just a Suncrest climb in my case. Nothing more than that.
Then at mile 91.4, you're going to turn left into Carter Aid Station. This is a little mini aid station filled with volunteers and, of course, filled with food and drink. And you can refill your bottles if you don't have enough for the last 12 miles in and 2 climbs ahead of you before you roll up that red carpet. So, yeah, it's a great place to start. I love the people there. Carter Aid folks,
oh, yeah.
They're like angels in the trees.
They are, and they are cheering you on, and they know that you have, that you are so close to having done something big. What's crazy though is what you just said there, Hottie. You've got 12 miles left in this 103.5 mile race, and you've still got 2 climbs ahead of you. So we will talk about those as well as all of the downhill that is ahead of you in the next special finish line episode of the course.
And now on to the course. Each week, we've been discussing a segment of the Leadville Out and Back format. We've been doing this in order, and we have reached Carter Aid Station at mile 91.4, a favorite spot on the course because it is a neutral aid station run by volunteers and because it signifies the home stretch. The hardest climbing is over, And it's right here you will know if your goal can be reached.
Yeah, I have to say, I almost don't dare to look at my bike computer when I come to this aid station because I'm afraid of the news it's going to tell me. You're about 12 miles and 1 hour from the finish line when you get here. I've gotten to the finish line from this aid station as fast as in 48 minutes and as slow as in an hour 5. That's sort of my range. And Hottie, I happen to know when I was looking up on Strava that you have done it as fast as 50 minutes. So you and I are very similar. But you get the idea. It's about an hour. Do the math. Ask yourself about whether having an hour left in this race, as far as you're concerned, is a good thing, which it could be, or a bad thing. Will your time as you roll into this checkpoint mean that you are on target and you can kind of cruise in? Or is it going to tell you that you're on the bubble and you need to find a match or two that you've been holding in reserve and didn't know you had? Or is it going to tell you that you need to set a new goal because your old one is frankly out of reach? I've had all three of these things happen, and depending on where I stand regarding my objectives, Carter Aid Station can be really emotionally intense. How are you about checking out your bike computer as you pull in here? Do you already know where you stand, or are you someone who only looks at your computer once in a while?
I would say, let's see, I did 2 pacings and 2 times on my own through this checkpoint. Mm-hmm. So when I was pacing for sure, I was extremely aware of where we stood at the time. I knew that our goal had slipped away more than likely at that point. My second attempt solo at Leadville, I was aware because I had friends around me. I had locals, in fact, I was riding with, and they told me, yeah, we're going to make it. You're fine. And I think my first time, well, I don't really remember the first time. I didn't really even know what Carter Aid Station was the first time through. I just kept riding. So,
yeah.
Fatty, I will say this about the last 2 segments we're doing in our course segment here on the Leadville 100 podcast. Both with Sugarloaf, that Sugarloaf descent, and the ride back over and down Kevens. I have a hard time remembering detail of these 2 segments because it is usually here that my body and mind are pretty thrashed.
Yeah, you really have been put through every kind of ringer there is, emotional, mental, spiritual. Hot swapping metaphors here, your tanks are totally drained. I recall thinking once during this last 12 miles of the race, something along the lines of, I'm no longer thinking in words. Just impressions and effort and exhaustion and smells. It's no longer thinking at a regular cognitive level at all. And so, yeah, I can totally understand how memory might be something that is a little bit hazy. We tend to forget things that are super painful, right? And just sort of an aside, I had a good friend once who was telling her story after racing the Crusher. This is just a couple of weeks ago. And she was saying that as she got to the top of the Col de Crush, she couldn't even really remember her name. So bear in mind, as you are unable to remember anything, who you are, where you are, what you're doing, or why, that this is what we pay for, folks. Getting to this part of your brain, this crazy, nonsensical, can't think, don't know where I am or what I'm doing, is at least a big piece of why we do this kind of racing. So, with that in mind, during this part of the race, you aren't necessarily going to remember or understand anything we're talking about right now. Let's nevertheless detail out, foot by foot, the rest of this course. The first thing to know about this part of the course is as you ride through this little aid station because you've been climbing up the pavement for what feels like forever and you're tired, you probably want to stop and eat or drink something there and maybe fill up a bottle. So let me ask you a mean question. Do you need to stop here? Remember, you are just 1 hour from the finish line. Do you have the food and the fuel that you need for 45 minutes to an hour or a little bit longer, just depending on your pace? If you've got a bottle and 1 or 2 gels, you probably don't need to stop. And if you've got close to your goal, but hitting it isn't a sure thing, maybe ride on through right now and stop when the race is over. Abracadabra, your finish time is suddenly a minute faster.
And the second thing, and maybe one of the most useful things to know, is that you are not done climbing when you leave Carter Aid Station. There's a natural tendency to think of that turnoff as a summit, but You keep climbing after filling up the water or whatever you need at Carteret. The stats for this double track climb, they just don't seem all that impressive. You climb just about 100 feet and a half mile. Not too bad, right? It's not exactly Columbine, but
No.
there are moments in that little half a mile that will almost certainly send you anaerobic. 11% and 15% pitches for 50 feet or so. Normally, these are the kind of things that you would just power up and over, but you're, 8+ hours into your ride now?
That's
so
right.
powering up and over things ain't so easy. On this day, don't feel bad if you need to drop to that grande gear and concentrate on staying upright as you creep up these little pushes.
Yeah. And then at mile 92, you crest and you're in the trees and you're flying downhill on a pine tree corridor, and it is just beautiful. And I know I keep referring to the smells, but honestly, it is the smells of Leadville that always snap me back to that race. In fact, being in any kind of high mountain pine tree filled area, it's like, wow, race time. Anyway, you're downhill and it's shady and it's double track and you've got these little 20-foot kickers you can just practically coast over because you've got great momentum. And all that pain and the misery from the several hours behind you just sort of disappears. And this part of the race is pretty weird because tell me if you get the same sensation or the same experience, Hottie. You started the day with 2,000 people just crushed around you. And now you're more or less alone, like maybe one or two people there.
I know the first time I went through here, I was alone. The
Yeah.
second time, I was spaced out enough. I mean, I could see people off in the distance. I had gone through Carteret with the group, and somehow we got a little broken up as we headed up over Kevens. So you can really hear yourself breathe, and it's hard to pick up another rider. And it's really kind of eerie almost. You're
Yeah.
like, where'd all the people go? Did I get left out on the course or something?
I have worried.
So it is strange.
Yeah, I have worried that I have missed a turn there. You know, even having done this many, many times, I've thought I'm by myself, and I know there's 2,000 riders out here. Where is everyone? Did I miss something? And I know actually Lisa did miss a turn here once, but we won't talk too much about that. But so it regardless of whether you're alone or with your other riders, the pain's going to come back because right after you go past a gate, you've got a hard left turn. A course marshal is likely to be letting you know that you ought to be dropping into a low gear, and you have a nasty 0.2 of a mile little grunt that is going to catch you by surprise if you are not ready for it and if there is no marshal there at the moment. If it does, and you are not riding with Shimano XTDI2, you are going to be in too tall of a gear because you've been going downhill, and if you don't shift into a low gear before you stall out, just accept that you're going to need to get off and you're going to have to push for a minute or two. So get off your bike if you have to, ride if you can, hoof it.
Yeah, hopefully you can just pick up that gate. The gate that is only open on race day. You went through it in the morning, you go back through it in the afternoon. When you see the gate, get ready to shift down because that little left right there, it'll catch you off guard. I've walked it once before. It just caught me off. And it can be gritty too and a little slippery too, so be careful there. And that's not the final climb either. You have some like momentarily little uphill grunts, a lot of like whoop-de-doos as the trail turns down.
Yeah, I actually got unintentional air on one of those whoop-de-doos one year and landed with my front wheel a little sideways, flipped over my bike off the right side of the trail, landed in rocks and stumps, and I was an impressively bloody mess at the finish line that year.
Yeah, that's a nice photo. That's a nice finishing photo. A little blood going down. You look like a mountain biker in Leadville then. So maybe a good idea to keep the rubber side down in this section, especially if you're completely exhausted. But whoop-de-doos notwithstanding, conditions are good, and your speed should reflect that. You should really start picking up some speed as you head downhill. But up ahead, just remember that hard right. This was the left-hand turn that you took very early in the morning on that first climb of the day. That left, that signaled that the Kevens climb, at least the steep part, was going to ease off. Well, now it's signaling that you're on the final descent of the day, and you will need to scrub some speed to make that right-hander.
That's right. You scrub that speed, and then you can let off the brakes because St. Kevens kind of changes there. Now it's County Road 9A, or what is often called Tennessee Creek Road. There's less rock. It's a little more sandy, erosion ruts and hollows where the water is carved out erosion trenches. You are hauling butt. Stay super alert. You have to almost be hyper alert because your normal state is going to be a little bit out of it, as Hottie was talking about just a second ago. In particular, watch for the little sharp dips that they can totally bottom out your suspension and set you up for a pinch flat if your tire is not inflated enough, and if you're not riding light.
Otherwise, it's a fun section, and you're really going to enjoy it because up ahead, there's still some tough stuff to come.
To be sure.
It seems like a good place, Fatty, for us to talk about our sponsor, Envy, for a moment.
Yeah, it definitely is. Everyone, including us, of course, talks about the Powerline as a pinch flat magnet, but it is an uncommon year that I don't see someone pinch flatted on this descent down St. Kevens. We're all bombing down and we're hitting rocks and these V-shaped dips at speed, and people are pushing their rims right through their tires, quite literally.
Yeah, the idea behind the Envy M-Series wheels is of ingeniously simple ideas. Make the leading edge of the rim wider so it doesn't cut through tires as easily, and then shape the tire bed in the center of the rim to ensure tire bead retention under hard cornering with low pressures.
Yep. So if you can have low pressure, then you are going to have a better contact patch. Upshot is great set and great feeling set of wheels that let you run low pressure, don't roll out from under you when you're cornering hard, they don't pinch flat, and they certainly are just the best wheels that I have ever ridden with. I have them on 3 sets of bikes at this point. My experience just bears all of the marketing material out, Hottie. I love the 525, the M525 from Envy.
And they look great too.
They do.
Awesome set of wheels. And of course, you can learn more about all of Envy's wheels and components, many of which seem like they're made with the Leadville Trail 100 in mind, but of course can handle pretty much anything you throw at them on any terrain.
Like the Breck
Just go
Epic.
to Envy. Yeah. Oh, Breck Epic would be a good spot. What about the Silver Rush? All those spots. Obviously.
All of them.
Just go to Envy. That's ENVE.com to find out more. Now, back to the course, Fatty. It's a pretty dramatic the way St. Kevens ends. You break out of the trees, veer right, and suddenly you're on double track with the mountains to your right and Leadville visible, downtown Leadville that is visible to your left.
Yeah, you're about 95.8 miles into the Leadville 100, and it is really starting to feel like you are getting close to the end of the race. You can really sort of smell the barn, as it were. Plus, you're back to pedaling, although a couple of years ago I had this crazy super strong tailwind as I made the right turn, and it just carried me along the dirt road. I actually sat up, put both of my arms out, made myself into as big of a sail as I could. I didn't have to pedal a bit on this section. That doesn't normally happen, though. Anyway, you cross the cattle guards, you might remember from the beginning of the day, and you're in a big gear, rolling along, pedaling, mostly flat, hyper-energized because you know that this thing is going to be over in, less than half an hour. And it's occasionally uphill, but you're going to have, just some good energy because you know that this thing is getting close and you're going to finish it in time. You might be elated and, take a look at your GPS and you notice, I can't be elated quite yet. I have to really buckle down, get in, work hard to finish my goal.
You're working your way back now to the pavement section coming off County Road. What did we say, 9A or 9D? I think it's 9 or 9A, something like that, which seems to take forever to come, that pavement section. A left onto County Road 9, across the tracks, and then a right. So with a left onto the pavement, back across those railroad tracks, and then a right.
Yep, and you're on pavement there. When you're on that left turn that you were talking about a second ago, there was this gymnast or cheerleader or something waving us onto that left turn, and she was doing this really crazy, elaborate cheer/dance thing to indicate we were supposed to make this left turn. And I remember thinking while I made the turn, I would not have thought that I'd have energy for a smile and a wave right now, but that was easily worth a smile and a wave and a thank you. Leadville totally shows up for this race, Hottie.
And then up ahead is a Y in the road. To the left is the road you came down in the morning. And this is where, if we did sound effects in this podcast, we would do a record scratch because you do not go left here. Veer right onto County Road 9D.
Yeah, this is super critical to know before the race, Hottie. A lot of people don't realize the first time they do the Leadville 100 that the Leadville Trail 100 is not a perfect out and back course. Up until this point, it has been. But the race finishes different than it began. And if you don't know the difference, it can be truly demoralizing. I know it was the first time I did the race. I know it was for Lisa the first time she did the race. I don't know about you if you happen to know that. But first timers, listen up. This part is important.
You're riding now just for a few minutes on pavement. It's downhill, which you'll be grateful for. Then you'll cross County Road 4. A marshal will be taking care of traffic here and will wave you straight on through. And then you're on a railroad service road. This is something I like to call the gutter because it's sunken just a bit, but it is a railroad service road because the railroad tracks are just off to your right, Fatty.
Yeah, I've never called it the gutter. I've actually always called this section the secret bonus finish line because somewhere on this little Jeep road railroad service track, that you're going to cross the 100-mile mark, and it will go unheralded and unremarked, and you probably won't notice that it happened. But of course, it doesn't matter because the Leadville 100 is, curiously, not a 100-mile mountain bike race. It is a 103.5-mile bike race, and you have a little further to go. Specifically, you have 3.5 miles left in this race. So, back to the Jeep Road. Conditions can really vary. If it's been raining, and that happens a lot around here, expect some deep puddles and mud. You do a little bit of line hunting, you can get around through it, but sometimes you just aren't going to. And that's why you see a lot of people finishing this race with very muddy faces. It is from splashing through this section right here. A lot of it can be avoided, however, but don't worry too much about it. Go through if you gotta.
See, it's just like a gutter. It collects water and funnels it somewhere. That's why I call it the gutter.
Yeah.
This is also a fun section. I actually like this section. It's fun because it can be wet, because the conditions can vary, and because it offers some nice little ups and downs. If you have some bike pumping skills, if you know how to pump your bike, like use your suspension to actually gain a little momentum, use it here and get some free speed. You can pump your bike through some of these dips and really keep your momentum going without having to pedal. This is also a good time to start mentally preparing for that last kick into town. Pretty easy to underestimate this final climb.
No, it is.
And this final climb is, I always forget the name of this, the Boulevard. It's actually not, you look at maps and it doesn't say Boulevard on any of the maps you'll see. I believe it's a county road of some county road number. But everyone in town, and everyone in Leadville, and everyone in the race calls it the Boulevard.
Yeah.
If this, again, if we were back to sound effects real quick, if we did sound effects, we'd have a thunderclap here.
Yeah. From this, because it's the Boulevard. Kaboom.
It is. As is, we'll just say that it is an intense way to finish a very difficult day. And it's a great place to make sure that you have burned every single last match in your matchbook. The first 100 or so yards really sucks. I mean, I hate it. It's super steep and it's rocky. And every time there's a hard rain, whatever line has been established gets washed out. A lot of people will walk it because of fatigue and the poor conditions. It's just a short punch in the gut type climb.
Yeah, it is. But you're going to get past it. It's not that long. And once you do, you're about 100.5 miles into the race. The Boulevard is going to take you to mile 103. So, in doing the math, the Boulevard is 2.5 miles long with around 300 feet of climbing. I mean, you think about that. That is a really mild road, but it is not going to feel like a very mild, short road when you are doing the race. It's not far, it's not hard, but I swear, the first time I did that race, the distance somehow magically got stretched out to 15 miles and the climb got extended to 1,000.
Yeah. Plus, if it's a sunny day, the sun will be beating down on you once you emerge from the trees. If it's been raining, you're going to get drenched. You're going to be convinced by the time you finish this climb that Ken Clover has a twisted sense of humor. There's a lot of back and forth, too, going on in this climb, I've always noticed. You pass someone, they pass you back. They pass you again, you pass them back. It's kind of like a little dogfight going on. I don't know what gets into people here, but there's certainly like this little boulevard competition that goes on.
Oh, yeah.
Now, when the dirt road starts to angle just left a little, you are nearly back on the pavement. volunteers will be up there, and they'll signal you left onto McQuethy Drive and then right onto 6th Street.
6th Street. You've made it onto 6th Street, and the turning is done. You are on the final stretch, but you start 6th with a ripper of a climb. You remember how fast you barreled down? It's amazing how steep and long this little nothing of a rise on a half-block city street can suddenly be. A little story here to sort of drive this point home. I've talked a number of times about the year Lisa raced for a sub-9 finish time with Rebecca Rush. I happened to witness a lot of the day firsthand because I leapfrogged them the whole day. Not intentionally, it just sort of worked out that way. Anyway, I had been behind them on the boulevard, and I caught up with Lisa right as they turned onto 6th. And it was at that moment that she just caved. She had given everything she had to give, and she still had a, half mile or whatever to go. And she just went into her granny, was soft pedaling, and she just looked at me and said, "I can't go anymore. I'm done." And that's when I gave the most successful pep talk I have ever given in my life, Hottie. I said, at this point, you could get off your bike and crawl to the finish line, and you would still get that sub-9 time. You have 20 minutes in the bank, so you're going to hit your goal no matter what. But if you can push it hard for just one more minute, you will finish in the 8:30s instead of in the 8:40s. And it would be pretty cool to have a finish with an 8:30 something on your sweatshirt or your jacket instead of an 8:40 something, wouldn't it? And she did. She found something somewhere, and she finished with an 8:38 and change. Even at the end, this kind of goes to show you can find a reason to go hard in this race.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's get to the finish line, though. There is a false summit here as you start to go up 6th Street. It will fool you into thinking it's over, but It's not quite. You're going to crest a little hill, and again, the locals will be out. They'll be cheering you the whole way, so there's plenty of encouragement. A downhill follows that crest. And so you'll crest up there, and you'll be able to see the finish line almost even-eyed with you. But in between you and the finish line is a dip in the road. So you're going to go down again. I know, Ken Clover, he loves this. Downhill, and then you will get the final kick to the red carpet. As you approach, get ready. They're going to announce your name over that blasting PA system.
Oh, it is a magical moment. And I'm going to tell you, Hottie, you were saying that there's a lot of this that is kind of fuzzy to you. I don't remember any of these little false summits or kicks that you're talking about from the race itself, only from when I'm pre-riding or riding around town. On race day, as soon as I see that turn onto 6th, I have all the energy in the world. Just the spike of adrenaline and the I'm almost there feeling. All of the pain, all of that just falls away, at least for 1 minute. And I would say 90% of that is because there is a huge crush of people there. For most of us, this is going to be the only time in our racing lives that we have this kind of finish. So take it in, enjoy it. Don't let this slide by your memory. There's a wall of noise, a crush of humans, a red carpet that you get to ride up on. I think this is one of the most famous mountain bike races that non-pros can do. And it is incredibly emotional when you cross. There is no way you are going to be unmoved by the finish. And the intersection of Harrison and 6th is going to mean something to you for the rest of your life.
Okay, so you cross the finish line, and don't forget, you get a medal.
Yep.
Go over and get your medal and a hug from Marilee. She stands there all day with medals and hugs ready for every rider who crosses the finish line. Your senses are going to be, again, overwhelmed. It's pretty chaotic at the finish, especially considering what you just came from. I mean, Fatty and I were just talking about how you were in the trees on Kevens. You're kind of alone. Where'd all those 2,000 racers go? And now there's all this sensory input. There'll be a lot of it, especially if you have family there. And there's obviously the town is out for you, and there's the announcer screaming and yelling. So get ready for some chaos. It's a big change from being kind of solo on your bike, single-minded. Now you've got a lot more things to deal with. There are refreshments off to your right, so you'll park your bike. They have a nice tent set up in front of the community center, fully stocked with stuff. Go over there, sit down, and start taking it in.
Yeah. You know what? You just raced the highest and as we like to say, arguably the hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country.
Fatty, here's an interesting little tidbit I just came up with as we finish up this monstrous episode of the Leadville Trail 100 bonus podcast. You know, if Albin Licata were to start the Leadville 100 at the same time we started describing this race, he'd be at the Columbine Mine turnaround right about now. Our course description took as long as it would take him to do half the race.
I'm not sure how to feel about that. Does it mean we talk too much or too little? I mean, if we were to double our detail, Albin could listen to us describe the course as he rode the entire course. And he could learn to race it in real time as he races it. That may be a project for season 2.
Yeah, talk about he could actually try to race us as we describe the course.
He could race the podcast. That's awesome.
What does Swift have on us? Come on now. That's good stuff there. Now, that's it for this bonus episode. Fatty would like to remind everyone that this podcast can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Music, and the home website, Leadville100podcast.com. Subscribing, rating, and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts helps others who've caught the endurance cycling bug find us. And if you have ideas or questions for us, head to the website's comment section and get in touch.
Yep, and follow me on Twitter. I'm @FatCyclist, or follow us both on Facebook. We're both very active in the Leadville 100 MTB participants group.
Good luck with the last little parts of your training. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you at the finish line.
It's so close you can practically taste it.